One day, I'll be an elder. I see myself with wrinkled eyes, telling my story to a group of young people. I tell them of how we almost got to the breaking point as a planet and how we climbed back to safety by repairing and protecting our natural systems, by changing our relationship with the planet.
One of the major contributors to the climate change is agriculture. They completely grow their crops on the rainwater. It's a completely greenhouse gas free agriculture, and most of all, it is the most nutritious food that it produces.
60% of tropical deforestation, more than 32 football fields per minute, is caused by only three food commodities: beef, soy, and palm oil. Today, the way we manage resources for energy, for materials, for water, and especially for food is leading to a planetary breakdown.
Our planet is in a state of emergency.
Both climate change and the loss of biodiversity have devastating consequences.
We've lost so much biodiversity already, 70% in just the last 50 years, and 1 million species will be extinct by 2050.
Biodiversity loss is an urgent threat to health, food supplies, and livelihoods across the globe.
But there are reasons for hope. More than 100 governments have agreed to protect over 30% of their lands and waters by 2030.
I endorse the Leaders' Pledge for Nature.
I endorse the Leaders' Pledge for Nature.
And commit to take urgent actions.
Urgent actions.
Urgent actions.
So that united
we can reverse biodiversity loss
by 2030.
By 2030.
For sustainable development.
Our life support system, the network of life on Earth that sustains our every breath, stands at the center of the biggest issues the world faces. As we hold the levers, do we allow our natural systems to flourish and regenerate, to continue to supply us with multiple benefits in a variety of ways? Or do we choose the path unrestrained, that of unsustainable human activities, of overexploiting nature and running it to the brink of extinction?
I would like to share with you a Sami story that was told to me by my mother and grandmother. Since the beginning of time, the humans and reindeer made an agreement that the reindeer would provide for us everything we need: our food, our clothing, our transportation, our security, and even our worldviews, teaching us our ways. And in return, we should provide for the reindeer pasture lands throughout the year and protect the reindeer from predators. And in this way, we agreed to take care of each other always. And this agreement cannot be broken. And it illustrates the need of being respectful with nature. And it warns us what happens if we are not, because breaking this contract means that we will cease to exist.
We have a duty to preserve the biodiversity of life on Earth, as conserving nature is not just a moral issue, but it is also a question of survival.
We are all agents of change. We can lead the transition away from unsustainable consumption and production. We can mobilize more partners along the way to help redirect and repurpose resources, to reverse biodiversity loss and put it on a path to recovery. And collectively, we can empower the transition with the engagement of all society including indigenous peoples and local communities, youth, women groups, and many others.
We're coming together, a network of people working in different ecosystems to restore our planet.
It's not all about harvesting. You have to give back. So you don't harvest everything all at once. You always leave a little.
One day, I'll be an elder, and I'll tell the story of our survival to my great-grandchildren. What story will you tell yours?
Welcome back to the Nature for Life Hub. I'm Joey Conway, the host of today's Nature for Life Hub sessions. We saw from the last session that local action is critical for safeguarding life on Earth. In this session, we'll continue this inquiry and take a close look at efforts around the world to protect, restore, and sustainably manage nature. In the first segment, we'll hear from efforts from local to global about how we need to accelerate the creation of protected and conserved areas. We'll learn about the 30 by 30 initiative, where more than 100 national leaders are committing to protect 30% of lands and waters by 2030. And we'll hear about different approaches to land and water protection at different scales. It's important to note that protection of land and water comes in many different shapes and forms, from national parks to indigenous and community conserved areas. Let's take a look.
What does nature mean to you? Harmony, balance, abundance. The oxygen we breathe, the food we eat, the clean water we drink are all supplied by the natural world. But we're taking too much while giving nothing back. Currently, there are 1 million plant and animal species threatened by extinction. Many will disappear in the next few decades. Humans and our livestock currently make up 96% of the mammals on Earth and 90% of the large fish in the ocean. Sharks, groupers, tuna, cod are gone. We are taking fish out of the water faster than they can reproduce, while rapidly changing the landscape of our planet. We're turning forests into farms, prairies into paddocks. We're using 3/4 of our fresh water on crops, and we have destroyed over 80% of the world's wetlands. Nature cannot keep up with us or absorb our impact any longer. We are totally out of sync with the natural world. This decade is our last best chance to restore the balance. The Campaign for Nature is working to protect at least 30% of our planet by 2030. When we give nature the space and time to recover, it does so magnificently. The 30 by 30 goal is a new approach to conservation, one where conservationists work hand in hand with indigenous peoples and local communities to secure their rights. Indigenous lands are projected to feel the impact of environmental degradation more than anywhere else. When communities manage their own lands and waters sustainably, it ensures their cultures, traditions, and lifestyles will thrive into the future. Protecting at least 30% of the planet also benefits the global economy. The services nature provides us with are worth $125 trillion, more than the global GDP, all for free. but our assaults on the natural world keep shrinking that figure drastically. However, if we invest in nature, it will outweigh the costs. Achieving 30 by 30 would only cost 0.2% of the global GDP, a fraction of what the world spends to subsidize agriculture, fishing, and the fossil fuel industry every year. In fact, it would take less than 3% of what the world currently spends on fossil fuel subsidies to protect 30% of the planet for the future. Protecting 30% of the planet will support over 30 million jobs in ecotourism and sustainable fishing, and would bolster food security the world over. Spillover of fish from marine protected areas would add millions of tons to the annual global catch. Nature is our only life support system, and it's at a breaking point. Now is the time to make a change. Nature can rebound. It can heal itself. But we have to let it.
The natural world is disappearing at an unprecedented rate. Over the coming decades, 1 million plant and animal species will face extinction. Ecosystems such as tropical forests are continuing to vanish right before our eyes. This means that the basis for our lives and prosperity is also disappearing. Without adequate funding, we cannot effectively tackle this biodiversity crisis. It is therefore essential that at COP15, the upcoming World Summit on Biodiversity, we set ambitious goals. And sufficient funding for the implementation of these goals is key. One instrument to ensure that funds are directed where they are needed is the Legacy Landscape Fund. It was set up in 2020 precisely in order to address the financing gap in long-term funding for land-based conservation. In its very first year of operations, the Legacy Landscape Fund secured 220 million euros from various sources. BMZ has so far contributed 182 million euros. Firstly, its funding goes directly towards protecting and restoring key ecosystems. Secondly, it strictly follows environmental and social safeguards and supports local communities. Healthy ecosystems are a harbor for biodiversity. They also help to mitigate climate change and provide vital ecosystem services for the world as well as for local communities. Areas funded by the Legacy Landscape Fund store massive amounts of carbon. And these ecosystems are also important to buffer against extreme weather events and help in maintaining food security. The coming months and years will be decisive. How can we come together to combat climate change, global biodiversity loss, and resurgent food crisis? That's why COP27 on climate this November and COP15 on biodiversity in December are crucial milestones for our joint efforts. At COP15, we need clear and bold action. Designating 30% of the Earth's surface as protected areas while integrating local populations is one example. The German government strongly supports this goal and its effective implementation. We are also pushing for the restoration of ecosystem and the transformation of our production and consumption patterns. We can only succeed if we respect the rights of indigenous people and local communities. They have to play an active role from the very start. And we must also make sure that global biodiversity goals are accompanied by adequate funding. The Legacy Landscape Fund is one very important instrument to reach this goal. It is up and running, and it's making a concrete difference on the ground. The Legacy Landscape Fund thus gives all interested donors the chance to turn biodiversity and climate pledges into tangible action where it matters most, in irreplaceable but highly vulnerable heavens for biodiversity. Let us invest in nature together.
I'm a director responsible for international conservation affairs, which is a portfolio that handles multilateral environmental agreement implementation and also transfrontier conservation areas within Zimbabwe Parks and Wildlife Management Authority. One of my first jobs when I joined the organization ZimParks about 15 years ago, I was an ecologist for Gonorrhea National Park and been part of the management team on the ground for 6 consecutive years, beautiful years of my life. And one thing I realized that it is so important that we have reliable, sustainable, and also predictable financing to do the work that we have to do on the ground, and not having to spend a lot of time looking for grants that are usually short-term and limited in scope, when we look at the ecosystems that we seek to manage and conserve. Therefore, the coming in of the Legacy Landscapes Fund, it has really helped us because we can now cover even those other issues or elements of our budgets that are very difficult to cover or to fundraise for, such as buying GPS batteries, buying patrol rations, or even taking care of the welfare of our rangers when attacked by wildlife. Therefore, it is very important that we continue to ensure that conservation receives not short-term financing, but very long-term financing, even beyond 15 years. It will be ideal because the ecosystems that we are conserving and managing are not short-term or snapshot in the nature's web of life. It is very important that this kind of support continues to receive even enhancement through government investment programs in infrastructure and several other initiatives to make conservation make sense.
We are losing animals, plants, and biodiversity every month, every day, every minute. There's not much time left to stop this trend. The Legacy Landscapes Fund can make a difference and is already up and running. Legacy Landscapes Fund is an innovative funding instrument for several reasons. It provides sizable long-term financing for protected areas in developing countries. We combine and leverage funding from private and public sources. We work alongside a vast range of partners, experienced NGOs and government agencies who jointly bring decades of expertise to implement ambitious, well-planned programs for safeguarding biodiversity hotspots. And our grantees work with community partners on the ground. They carry out their conservation activities in accordance with LLF's rigorous environmental and social safeguard standards. That means local communities and indigenous peoples are involved from the start and that human rights are protected. LLF support allows protected areas to embark on long-lasting conservation for both communities and for wildlife. By offering grants of $1 million annually for 15 years or even for perpetuity, Legacy Landscapes Fund enables lasting change. This financial stability is what turns paper parks into meaningful centers for biodiversity and into hubs for a healthy conservation economy. Additionally, Legacy Landscape Fund uses a program approach for funding. This means the money can be used flexibly wherever it is needed most. Next to 7 pilot sites, Legacy Landscape Fund had its first open call for proposals earlier this spring, which means our portfolio will grow significantly in the coming years. I have personally worked in conservation and alongside communities. When provided a permanent funding stream, organizations have the chance to build long-term, trustful relationships with people and with communities who matter most. Because preserving nature takes time and needs trust between all actors. We now hope that the Biodiversity COP in December will lead to bold, reliable financial commitments from all partners. But short-term, stop-and-go conservation approaches do not work anymore. I welcome you to join Legacy Landscapes Fund for effective long-term conservation funding for our most precious biodiversity areas.
When vez mi abuela mencionaba que las personas tienen diferentes tipos de habilidad. En términos awajún lo llaman waymaku, y en ese tiempo los waymakus eran más los varones porque a ellos se les daba la oportunidad de crecer, y mi abuela me dijo, tú puedes ser otro tipo de waymaku. Mi nombre es Jessica Tzamajen Lirio, soy jefa de la Reserva Comunal Tontanain. También trabajo para el Parque Nacional Ichincamuja y la zona reserva Santiago Comay.
La provincia de Condorcanqui tiene 3 distritos, el distrito de Nieva, Cenepa y Río Santiago. Todos los distritos con más del 90% con población indígena, awajún y huampis, con los más altos índices de pobreza.
Tenemos un modelo de sostenibilidad financiera que, si bien estamos en un proceso, está dando resultados, y la cual puede servirle como un modelo para las otras áreas naturales protegidas.
Este modelo es un modelo histórico, ya que es la primera vez que las propias comunidades nativas de una reserva comunal han logrado constituir una empresa y destinar parte de sus utilidades para tareas de conservación y gestión de la propia área natural protegida.
Copinde es una cooperativa indígena del pueblo awajún huampis. Es brazo derecho de ECA, el pueblo indígena. Está marcando una historia para que el Estado diga, ya tengo mi pueblo fuerte.
Se forma a partir de las propias necesidades de las comunidades socias del ECA, de sus recursos naturales, vinculados a la producción y comercialización de unas líneas de negocio.
Y ahí hemos tenido que ver todas las cadenas de valor de cada una de las iniciativas que se han promovido. Las prioritarias es el tema del cacao, el latte de Xiringa y la piscicultura.
Una de las experiencias muy interesantes es la biobilletera, la cual parte de la fusión del cuero vegetal con el cuero de pescado para formar un único producto y orientarlo a un mercado de moda sostenible.
Pacotana hemos puesto marca, cuero de Paco y Gamitana, y eso está registrado en Indecopi, en nombre del pueblo indígena.
Con esos recursos ya el ECA puede salir a gestionar más proyectos para el ámbito de las comunidades nativas.
No hay que dejar de mirar los otros beneficios que se generan, más allá de lo económico y productivo, que son el ayudarnos a cerrar brechas sociales. No podemos seguir trabajando como islas aquí en un contexto tan rico y con tantas oportunidades como son nuestras comunidades nativas y zonas de Amazonía.
Nosotros trabajamos, nosotros producimos siranga, producimos cacao, ayudamos para trabajar conjuntamente con los socios y para salir adelante. Nuestro objetivo es llegar a otro país.
Yo tengo un aliado del Estado que es Cernam, un aliado que es privado que es Analpes y un aliado estratégico que es PNUD. Nosotros somos cogestión. Queremos que ese modelo sea replicado en otras comunidades también, para que ya todos puedan entender. Cogestión es entenderse, de buen acercamiento, de buena fe, de buena confianza.
Esa confianza es la que a nosotros nos ha llevado a buscar esos espacios que necesitan las comunidades para que puedan mejorar sus calidades de vida. El proyecto Amazonía para nosotros ha sido una oportunidad para fortalecer las capacidades como cogestores. Con eso nosotros cerraríamos ese ciclo que necesitamos de ser un área que va a tener perpetuidad. Tener a mi hija aquí ha sido como recargarme de energía, motivación de hacerle conocer todo este proceso, las comunidades, los ríos, el bosque. Es nuevo todo para ella. Ella dice Tajima, y ella sabe de que el bosque es muy importante y me lo repite también.
Yo me siento alegría porque existe la ecología y también va a existir la economía. Cuando yo tengo aprovechamiento y conservación, es el desarrollo sostenible. Mi papá me había dicho, usted tienes que apoyar a tu gente, tienes que estar con tu pueblo.
El bosque no solo es nuestro mercado, es la razón de ser de las poblaciones indígenas. Creo que ese es el bosque para mí, mi razón de ser.
Large mammals are vitally important for maintaining healthy ecosystems on our planet. Acting as landscape engineers, they shape the composition of plant life and wildlife, from birds and aquatic creatures to trees and soil organisms. They're also important for humanity. They provide key ecosystem services upon which we rely, delivering freshwater, absorbing carbon pollution, preventing wildfires, and sustaining local livelihoods. A new scientific report examines the current state of large mammal groupings, called assemblages, and how they can be restored to enhance ecosystems around the world. In the year 1500, the vast majority of the world's land supported large mammal assemblages. Today, less than 15% of the world's land retains complete assemblages. The good news is that through rewilding efforts, more than half of the world's ecoregions could have their mammal assemblages restored by reintroducing just 1 to 3 species in strategic locations. The reintroduction of wolves in the US proves that it works. The wolves rapidly rebalance the ecosystem, resulting in increased carbon storage, better water quality, and millions of dollars in economic benefit. The new study finds that 20 species can play a particularly important role in triggering the recovery of ecosystem function around the world, from boreal taiga and tropical rainforests to grasslands and drylands. In North America, reintroducing the brown bear, American bison, wolverine, and black bear across 60 ecoregions could restore over 3.2 million square kilometers of land area. In Latin America, reintroducing the pampas deer, cougar, jaguar, and South American tapir across 106 ecoregions could restore over 2 million square kilometers. In Africa, reintroducing the hippopotamus, lion, African wild dog, and cheetah in 50 ecoregions could restore over 416,000 square kilometers. In Europe, reintroducing the European bison, Eurasian beaver, reindeer, and Eurasian lynx in 39 ecoregions could restore over 944,000 square kilometers. In Asia, reintroducing the wild horse, tiger, dhole, and wolf in 70 ecoregions could restore as much as 1.9 million square kilometers. By reintroducing these 20 species, we could restore large mammal assemblages across 8.5 million square kilometers of land area. With 2021 marking the beginning of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, the authors of the paper advocate for a renewed focus on large mammals. These 20 species can act as agents of change, doing the lion's share of work to rebalance the diversity and abundance of life on Earth.
I'm not sure what I would be without the ocean. I'm not sure where in space I would be without having the majority of the planet as the centering place. It feels like home. It feels right. And you protect what's home. You protect your family. You protect what you love. San Francisco, 2007, this oil container ship hit the Bay Bridge, and all the oil was headed out to the Marin Headlands where I live. Wave upon wave of toxic, gooped up oil was just washing in the beach. I started to feel this cognitive dissonance. I'm using the ocean and I'm not giving back to it. And it's changing literally under my feet. We've lost half the world's coral reefs in the last 50 years, half the world's mangrove forests, half the world's kelp forest, you name it, and we've messed it up. I realized that I had to make a change and dedicate my life to trying to fix this problem. And that was the start of Sea Trees. To me, being an ecopreneur really means one thing. You're looking at the most pressing issues on the planet, and you're looking at how to solve them as part of a business. And you're keeping the planet at the center of every decision that you make.
So as a geologist, I think about geologic time and the history of the Earth. And there's been 6 major mass extinctions on the planet. All of them have been caused by CO2 emissions. And we're actually emitting CO2 faster and at a higher magnitude than has ever happened in the history of the Earth.
No matter how many trees we plant on land, we will never reverse climate change without including the ocean ecosystems, sea trees, as a part of this plan.
The ocean plays a huge role in sequestering carbon because it's the original carbon sink. Since the beginning of time, it's always been this place where excess carbon dioxide could be captured. Now we're seeing so much extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere because of burning fossil fuels and deforestation. it's reached its cap. It can't handle much more.
This is an existential threat. I want my daughter to have a livable world. That's more important to me than anything else in the world.
We realize, okay, this is a way to make blue carbon conservation tangible. Plant a sea tree.
To put back more of that seaweed, more of that plankton, more of those seagrasses, so that they can do what they do naturally, absorb that CO2.
I wanted anyone in the world to be able to have this impact, literally in the same way that you could order up a ride share or something on your phone, go to Sea Trees and restore 10 square feet of kelp forest. It'll take you 45 seconds to do it. Why isn't saving the planet as easy as buying something off the internet?
The place that we've been focusing our efforts is the Palos Verdes Peninsula. Over 100 years of time, we were able to document the loss of over 85% of that forest. If I went out and showed you the loss of the redwoods in California, that 85% of them went away in 100 years, people would be pulling their hair out. It's an invisible forest to most.
So we are here in California at the Channel Islands Harbor, and we're going to be looking at the kelp forest ecosystems, and we're going to be exploring how we could possibly get involved. Let's do it.
Volunteer out here.
See you on the bottom.
I think people aren't talking about the ocean as a major solution for climate change because what's out of sight is out of mind. But scientists are clear. The ocean really does hold the key to helping us mitigate the impacts of climate change.
So the work that we've been doing has been down in the Palos Verdes Peninsula. That kelp forest, the main problem there was an overabundance of these purple sea urchins. It's the sea urchin divers who will go down there to put the kelp forest and that ecosystem back in balance. Our role is to try to find the funding for it, to create scientific partnerships, and then really bringing the story home.
We've been restoring kelp forests for a couple decades. The decades prior to Sea Trees' involvement, we were hammering away in a vacuum. And Sea Trees has now just made us available to the world, and we've had more people interested, more curious folks, more support coming in from around the planet than I could have imagined was possible.
I think Sea Trees' success to date is establishing a repeatable model, a template.
I love the fact that this project also creates a beautiful synergy between the scientific community, the volunteers that are in that area, the fishers that are in that area as well, creating jobs and living wages for people that need it.
We just got to assemble the right team, give them the right tools, give them the proper support, and then voila, in a year's time, you have an ocean that went from a moonscape to the most amazing underwater environment that I've ever seen in my life.
Protect what you love. And it's kind of that simple. And that's what Sea Trees is about. And to be a surfer is to kind of have a very intimate relationship with what you love.
But that's where I think surfing can be really helpful, because surfers are a face of like loving the ocean. And we use that power of surfing to engage and inspire, to help tell the story of the ocean can help us solve climate change if we help the ocean.
For 20 years, I was so grateful to travel around the world as a professional surfer. That also gave me firsthand access and understanding to our ocean health and how that has transformed in the 20 years that I was traveling and surfing. And I really think as surfers, we're really like ocean stewards. We're the ones that are really aware of that ocean health because we're living and breathing in it. I'm so grateful to be an ambassador for Sea Trees. They're not talking about what they're gonna do, they're doing stuff now. And sharing that stoke with my community is what being an ambassador is about.
I think the surfing community is a perfect ambassador for that message because we don't have a sport without the ocean. We don't have a sport without the environment. I want the world to know exactly what Sea Trees is doing because they're doing really important work. They're literally helping save our planet.
With the app and with how easy that Sea Trees has made it for people to donate and get involved and activate, it makes you feel good.
You literally plant a tree. Dollar plants a tree. Dollar plants a tree. 2 clicks, you've done it.
If we can galvanize people to understand that they can have a hand in restoring the ocean and helping mitigate climate change, I really believe that this is the #1 solution that we can all be a part of.
To push an idea beyond California takes an insatiable desire to commit your life to influencing the world. So Michael and Kevin, that's basically their life's work. They're spending their currency of influence on reversing climate change.
Don't be scared to be the only or the first. That's how you create change, is by being an innovator, by being, someone that breaks the mold.
And it doesn't have to be that complicated. Really, it's about things that are very natural to us, which is taking care of the planet that takes care of us.
I tell my daughter Oceana, who's just about to turn 10, that I wake up every day trying to make the ocean as good a place as I remember it when I was growing up and I was her age. I keep that, in my heart and in my mind of like, this is who I'm doing it for. This is why I'm doing it. Yeah, there's a larger world out there that I want to do this for, but for my daughter, that's where it hits hard. Sorry. Yeah, that's it.
We know that protecting our planet is essential if we are to create a planetary safety net for humanity. But that's not all. We also need to accelerate actions to repair and restore our planet. According to the United Nations Global Land Outlook, 1 out of every 4 hectares is already degraded. Restoring ecosystems is critical for our very survival and will help ensure that we have clean water, safe communities, thriving biodiversity, and most importantly, a livable planet. In this next segment, we'll take a look at how different efforts around the world are restoring ecosystems and are becoming part of generation restoration. Let's learn more.
It's easy to blame someone else for our own mistakes. We humans are doing same with climate change. The results of unplanned development and unlimited greed have been conveniently connected to the climate change. As we are evolving day by day, our connection to nature is diminishing. The results are quite disappointing, but visible through more frequent and intense events of floods, droughts, storms, heat waves, sea level rise, melting glaciers, and warming oceans. This is directly impacting the biodiversity that is present around us. And that's how we are inching towards the 6th mass extinction, the natural phenomenon otherwise but accelerated due to human activities. We, being a part of biodiversity, are obviously impacted due to this. So what's the solution? Does nature have solution to it? The answer is yes, but we have very little time left, and now it's time to take actions. The nature-based solutions, also called as NBS, is the answer, but it needs to be prioritized and integrated with every step that we take for living. The NBS focuses on human well-being and the biodiversity benefits through an ecosystem-based approach which considers specific issues as well as considers the restoration and protection while developing the strategies. We must reduce the already existing CO2 from atmosphere to combat against climate change issues. And this will happen mainly through plantations under restoration activities. The thought was acclaimed on the international platform, resulting in United Nations declaring 2021 to 2030 as a decade on ecosystem restoration. And many countries are pledging to bring 350 million hectares of the world's deforested and degraded land into restoration by 2030 during the Bonn Challenge. We at Terracon Ecotech Private Limited have always worked towards the conservation of biodiversity, although through reconciliation with the development. However, to act against the climate change at local level, we decided to develop a project that is aligned with NBS following restoration guidelines. The concept of the project is to use tree plantation to enhance or restore the ecosystem as well as to support the income needs of locals, vulnerable communities, and to build climate resilience. In general, many rural areas struggle for their sustenance and meeting their basic needs mainly due to reduced natural resources. So the idea is that the plantation will ensure increase in green cover, reduction of soil erosion, maintaining the species diversity, and also creating green jobs. The outcomes are connected to as many as 11 Sustainable Development Goals, and therefore, along with the community, the investors will also be benefited. The area we have been working is in water stress despite having a very high rainfall, as more than 10% of the forest is degraded and thus the topsoil is eroded with the surface runoff. At the beginning of the project, we studied the traditional knowledge and the biodiversity of the surrounding areas to understand the dominance and the demand of the species. The outcome is interpreted for the selection of the species to be planted, which was mix of fruit species and the forest species. An attempt was made to select maximum native species for the ecoregion. Under this program, the proposal was discussed with the investors for the initial funding. The farmers are incentivized and encouraged to plant trees on their farmlands. Saplings for plantations were provided from nearby nursery, and in some cases, it was encouraged to develop nursery at the village level for further income. All the monetary support and required skill sets were provided to the community. The rainwater will be conserved by creating farm ponds to provide water to the saplings in the initial days. Once the trees are mature, all the non-timber forest produce will belong to community, and investors will be benefited either under CSR activities, offsetting their emissions, or even by taking credits of it. Our expertise and experience in tree inventorization, plantation, and biodiversity assessment has allowed us to use NBS for ecological restoration and sustainable livelihood in the region.
If you've ever planted a tree with a child or with your community, you know what a profound act of hope it is. Hope for the future for all species. My name is Pollyanna. I'm head of community and philanthropy at Carbon Positive Australia, and I'm delighted to be here sharing with you as part of the Nature for Life Hub 2022. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm filming on, the Kabi Kabi Gubbi Gubbi people. I acknowledge and honor their unbroken connection to country and the fact that this land was never ceded. I honor and acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging, and any Kabi Kabi people that might be watching this video. Carbon Positive Australia is a registered Australian charity that has been planting native Australian trees and forests for over 21 years. During that time, we have restored over 5,000 hectares of land with over 6 million trees and captured 650,000 tons of CO2, working with landholders, communities, and organisations. Part of our mission is to empower all Australians to take positive and practical action for climate change. We also want to address the challenges to rapid restoration and reforestation in Australia. We're really excited to announce our new initiative, Plant Trees Australia. In response to community and donor feedback, we've developed an online community tree planting hub for Australia in collaboration with New Zealand organisation Eat My Carbon. But before I share more about that, let's have a look at the bigger picture. We know that what we do right now has an impact on tomorrow, next year, 100 years from now, and beyond that. Between 2010 and 2021, Australia lost 8.7 million hectares of tree cover, equal to a 21% decrease in tree cover since 2000. That loss represents 2.4 gigatons of carbon dioxide emissions. The majority of these losses were in natural forests, not plantations. In the period between 2001 and 2021, Australia gained just 1.4 million hectares of tree cover. That loss of tree cover is a significant contributor to Australia's increasingly warm temperatures. The IPCC report of 2021 stated that Australia is warming at a faster than average rate compared to other countries, already reaching an increase of 1.4 degrees Celsius over the last century. Across all parts of the country, the warming signal is clear and above normal levels of variability. This is pushing parts of the country to new record high temperatures, and projections suggest that this is only going to get worse. These are grim statistics, but it's not too late. Everyone who's alive at this time in Earth's history has a part to play in restoring all of our ecosystems to thriving. Everyone needs to participate in local action that removes carbon from the atmosphere, mitigates the effects of climate change, and creates resilience for communities and landscapes. Local and grassroots action is urgently needed and so potent. Nature-based solutions to the enormous crisis that we're facing, like, for example, biodiverse native tree plantings, are critical as they restore the healthy ecosystems that are crucial to human and animal health. The challenges to rapid restoration and reforestation in Australia specifically include lack of funding for grassroots community tree planting projects. Often these projects are run by volunteers with limited time and capacity to source funding, or lacking the credentials needed to be eligible for traditional grant funding. There's currently no central hub for landholders, planting groups, and funders to find each other, meaning that land that could be restored isn't being restored. There's currently no method for measuring the carbon removal impact of community planting, meaning that the impact of grassroots community restoration activity isn't being taken into account by local councils and governments. Large-scale tree planting in Australia is often not biodiverse and doesn't restore landscapes. It might be limited to 5 or 6 species of tree, particularly in carbon sequestration planting projects. Biodiverse native plantings are critical to ecosystem health and restoration of the landscape. When we lose biodiversity, we lose ecosystem health, and that affects everyone, including human beings. So what's the online hub for? The online hub that we've developed with Eat My Carbon brings together everyone in the field of community planting so that millions of native trees can be planted in the right places. By using the hub, communities are empowered and funded to take action on climate change, and the land can be restored to vitality. More critically still, communities can attract and secure funding for their tree planting projects. The online hub is called Plant Trees Australia. It enables community planting groups, landholders, volunteers, and others who are already doing reforestation work or who want to do reforestation to find one another, source funding, and plant trees. Fundamentally, it helps people in communities who want to plant trees to find the people they need to make that happen. It's also a model that other countries can replicate. Excitingly, the platform also measures indicative carbon dioxide sequestered by tree planting activities that are logged on the platform. With further development funding, we can improve these measurements and create a highly accurate picture of the carbon dioxide sequestered by community planting over time. This will help local, regional, and state governments to understand the CO2 sequestration impact of grassroots community tree planting in their area. This is a long-term project with a big mission. If it's successful, we estimate an additional 2.4 million trees will go into the ground across Australia over the next 3 years, with millions more possible in the longer term. So why do this? Providing an online community hub enables all Australians to take beneficial local action on climate change. It brings people together to take positive, nature-based action. Funding community groups who might otherwise never receive funding to plant native trees in the right places allows restoration activities that might not otherwise go ahead to actually happen. Measuring indicative carbon sequestration from community planting across the country to gauge contribution to carbon neutrality enables government agencies and others to measure the scale and impact of community planting. Bringing everyone together in one online hub will enable the funding and planting of millions of native trees across Australia through community-initiated and led action. Trees that will sequester carbon, restore soil health, increase biodiversity, cool urban areas, provide habitat for wildlife, restore water cycles, filter air pollution, and so many more of the incredible benefits that trees have. And that provides long-term benefits for future generations of all species. This project contributes towards 4 of the Sustainable Development Goals: SDG 3, Good Health and Wellbeing; SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities; SDG 13, Climate Action; and SDG 15, Life on Land. Plant Trees Australia can be replicated in any country around the world, and the software is ready to do that. To find out more about the platform here in Australia or in your country and how you can implement it in your country, please get in touch with us. The details are on the screen. Thank you so much for listening and for whatever your contribution is to bringing this planet back to thriving.
This area that we're in is called the Wauakua, the realm of the gods. The eastern part of Mauna Kea catches about 388 million gallons of water per day. Our native forest is ideal for catching that water, but a big part of that system is not just about the water for us, it's about native forest health. We've seen the Apapane and the Amakihi. And that includes some of the rarest plants, and we've also got the rarest birds in all of Hawaii. This tree, probably in the area of maybe 500 or 600 years old. We are the Mauna Kea Watershed Alliance. We're part of the Hawaii Association of Watershed Partnerships.
We appreciate you all coming today to volunteer to help plant some trees.
There's about 416,000 acres of partnership lands. Let's get everything loaded up. We've got a lot of work to finish today. The main thing that we're doing right now is we are planting native trees for native birds. And there is a sense of urgency because of habitat loss and avian disease.
The ecology of Mauna Kea has changed drastically in the last 200 years. We've had to deal with the introduction of non-native species, both plant and animal.
Probably the main threat to native birds is disease carried by mosquitoes.
And those mosquitoes are causing a lot of problems through the transmission of avian malaria.
So the way we get around that is we are planting native trees to make the Kanaka Leonui bird corridor so the birds can get away from the mosquitoes that are carrying that disease.
With climate change, with avian malaria moving up the mountain in elevation as temperatures increase, it is even more urgent to continue that reforestation effort. been a lot of reforestation in these areas.
So we'll just continue to plant trees. We're very thankful for the support of American Forest and Salesforce for funding the work that we do with the Hakalau greenhouse.
The greenhouse has been really the heart of getting this restoration work accomplished. Here's the Hakalau Forest sign commemorating the work that was done in the 1990s with American Forests. The first big effort really at the National Wildlife Refuge was an American Forest effort that started that reforestation process.
Yep, EEB.
And since that time, it's grown to over 580,000 trees planted.
These were planted, I think, maybe something like 7 years ago.
So we're trying to bring back the functionality and the forest to what its former state would have been.
Here we have a kala, it's a Hawaiian raspberry. Yahi, sandalwood, also known as awa.
I'm just so thankful for all of the work that's done to grow our koa trees, to grow our ohia, to grow our pilo, to grow all of these trees that provide the drinking water that we drink.
You know, we're really stewarding a landscape that the future inherits.
Hey Dad, what kind of fern is this?
Oh yeah, this one is actually called... We really want to make sure that we're protecting and restoring these resources for our children and our children's children. These are all the things that make us who we are and define who we are as Hawaiians.
Ban mường ơi, bà Pu Hầu ơi, từ cây xưa ta đã mỹ có phần, bản mường hầu đã mỹ tơi lờ. Ý nghĩa của bài hát này là mình đã có cái lùng từ ngày xưa, cái lùng này thay đổi được cuộc sống của người Thái dân mình. Cái sáo này mình phải chặt bò đi này. Mình khai thác nó không đúng kỹ thuật á thì rừng lùng nó không tốt. Mình phải chặt xuống tận gốc này thì cái cây còn lại nó mới trưởng thành đẹp hơn. Chặt xong á thì bắt đầu là mình phải dọn dẹp những cái ngọn của nó, cái chỗ gốc của nó mình phải phát quang lại cái chỗ đấy cho sạch sẽ để cho cây nó phát triển. Và mình phải dọn sạch. Ngày xưa thì nói chung là chưa đúng độ tuổi mình cũng chặt phá đấy đấy. Xong rồi mình cứ chặt bừa bãi đến lúc là cái cây bụi đấy nó xấu đi và nó cũng không phát triển tốt như bây giờ. Từ khi có cái dự án đến mình biết cách khai thác này, rồi là chọn những cái cây lùng tốt đưa đi bán cho công ty như công ty Đức Phong ở gần đây này thì nó cũng được thuận lợi hơn, được nhiều mặt hàng hơn. Với lại trời nắng như thế này thì giá cả nó cũng được giá hơn. Mình phơi khô lên là nó rất là đẹp màu, nó vàng. Về giá trị kinh tế thì mình có thể hàng năm mình cũng có thu nhập cho gia đình ấy, nhất là để cho con cái học hành ấy. Cái rừng lùng ngay bên cạnh đồng lúa đấy này, có cây rừng lùng này nó giữ được ẩm với là đất đai màu mỡ nó cũng rất là đẹp, cây lúa nó cũng phát triển rất là tốt. Mình đã khai thác xong á, thì mình lại trồng lại, có cái dự án đến được học kỹ thuật về trồng rừng lùng, sau là mình bày cho mình để tạo thành cái rừng lùng mình trồng á. lấy cái gốc này chứ, lấy cả 3 cây luôn.
3 cây một chuẩn.
Cây này cũng có vẻ tốt thật đó.
Chọn cây một đẹp mới cách để làm giống chứ. Đấy vừa lấy chồng cũng muốn lấy người đẹp thôi mà. Lâu công hàng mới tốt chứ.
Đưa về trồng cả luôn.
Trồng cả luôn.
Sao nó mới phát triển nhanh. Cứ bơ ê.
Rồi. Cho một túi rửa này.
Đấy, gần được rồi đó. Sẽ cho lờ mà hầu đã mi có quấn năm bữa rồi hầu cùng xây cuộc đời bản mường hầu tới không hằng mì.
Hi human, I'm coral number 1358 billion. Today, I want to tell you about Healing Coral. Healing Coral is a social movement that actively works to make people aware of my existence, the coral, as a living being, and how you humans interact with me. Healing Coral wants to heal your relationship with the blue planet we live on. Yes, the blue planet, that's 71% of water that surrounds what you call Earth, in other words, the ocean. This organization creates art pieces with different worldwide artists and transforms them to NFTs. Oh, you human! You don't know what an NFT is? Okay. Similar to cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, NFTs are digital assets that can be purchased, sold, and traded, just as you could anything else you owned. When something is tokenized, it's attached to a digital certificate of ownership that proves it is yours. When someone decides to purchase an NFT, they naturally won't be getting a physical asset to hold as they would if they bought an original painting by Van Gogh. Instead, their purchase of the original digital asset is recorded in a public blockchain ledger accessible by millions of computers worldwide. So, the blockchain of Healing Coral NFTs is all the information of each of the marine conservation and restoration projects they support across Mesoamerica and the Caribbean. From coast to coast, Healing Coral chooses projects that have a holistic approach to solve our problem. Yes, human, is our problem. Did you know that if you and your friends continue consuming the natural resources the way you are, by 2050 not even my species or yours will exist? But we are not here to talk about the worst case scenario. We are here to explain you how by funding education, participative restoration projects and experiences that bring oceans out for everyone to learn and take action, you can generate consciousness of me, the coral, as a living species that needs my ecosystem, the mangroves and the seaweed to be healthy to produce the oxygen that you, human and all the species need for living. That's why Healing Coral has created an innovative instrument of decentralized finance, to accelerate the regeneration of marine ecosystems while generating profit. Using a payment for results method. They have partnered with companies that use artificial intelligence and geospatial information systems to monitor in real-time water quality and coral health to develop prospective analysis to plan actions, evaluate impact and support their regenerative partnerships program, where they involve community, governments and the private sector to be part of the change which enables all humans to invest and close the funding gap for conservation. So is simple, you take care of me, the coral, save my life and I help you to save our planet. Humans becoming aware of my existence and how your daily actions affect me, you invest in projects that take care of me, and make profit for your well-being and for your wealth. Support Healing Coral, become part of the reef.
We've watched Communitree grow over the last 12 years, from the first early days when we began to work with Taking Root, to where we are now with this inspirational project becoming the largest reforestation project in Nicaragua. Over the last 3 years, since Springer Nature began carbon balancing their footprint through Communitree, it's grown into a globally significant model for reforestation through improving livelihoods. 13.7 million trees have been planted, over 10,000 hectares, and nearly $10 million is being paid to farmers and communities. They're bringing down to earth 2.2 million tons of carbon dioxide through sequestration.
En mi finca yo vivo con mi esposa, mis 3 hijos y mi papá. Yo me levanto a las 5 de la mañana y lo primero que hago es ir a revisar el bosque. No me descuido siempre de la agricultura, siempre vivo pendiente.
Springer Nature and the other companies that have engaged at scale have enabled a doubling of future forest cover from 5,000 hectares in 2020 to 10,000 now. Over 2,000 farmers and their families have secured improved and new forest-based livelihoods. We now see this project as the flagship for bringing carbon down to earth through nature-based carbon removals. Rigor is shown by Communitree's selection as one of the founding projects of the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration. Scale is highlighted by the World Economic Forum's selection of Taking Root as one of the top 12 organizations leading change in the carbon market. Innovation is spotlighted by Google's selection of the project as one using advanced tech to create climate impact and the inclusion of the Taking Root team in Google's Climate Accelerator. Over the last 3 years, the project has strengthened what it delivers in terms of action on carbon, action on forests with communities. 2022 is set to be the record year for Communitree. It's on track to bring 1 million tons of carbon down to earth this year. This project has plans to expand and continue to enhance the quality of carbon removal, and it will achieve this by increasing farmer incentives, building more capacity and jobs in the teams, and further investing in its tech platform.
Yo le diría a los nuevos productores que se involucren pues en el proyecto, que es un proyecto muy bueno. Son personas muy honestas que lo que prometen pues lo cumplen. Que se involucren a sembrar bosques, pues plantas, porque eso es bueno. Y que se involucren, que se esfuercen mucho para que puedan ver un bosque así grande como el que yo tengo, un bosque muy grande, bonito.
Scientists tell us that if we continue to manage our agricultural land in the same way that we have for the past 50 years, we will only have 55 growing seasons left before we lose most of natural soil fertility around the world. We must change how we produce food and fiber. Transforming our land management toward regenerative practices, practices that feed, nourish, and restore productivity is the most essential step we need to ensure food security for future generations. In this next segment, we'll take a look at regenerative agricultural practices from around the world and conclude with a fireside chat from the Rodale Institute, a group that has been championing regenerative agriculture since 1947.
There are only 2 types of agriculture. There's regenerative agriculture and degenerative agriculture. And every other kind of agriculture is one or the other. What's regenerative is management and the decision-making process.
My goal is not simply to sustain the current condition, but to regenerate it into what it once was.
And what has been lost is how the land was conceived of. It's still held up in that way in Afro-Indigenous communities and Black and Indigenous communities and other communities
a different conception of land as an elder that can only be stewarded and cared for in communities.
Is a lot of these practices and a lot of this knowledge has been held for hundreds of years by people indigenous to this continent.
There are cultures that have always upheld regenerative practices and always understood the holism and the utter dependency of this human race on every other species in every native environment.
It's our way of life. It holds up to our practices, our stewardship practices, our faith in believing things, our ability to have respect and reverence for all things.
Well, are we looking at the people who are actually doing a regenerative part of the agriculture? Because I feel like indigenous people, especially, and people of color, they've been doing this their whole life.
Our farming is directly tied to our ceremonies and our religious beliefs. And so therefore it's resilient as the get-go, because those two things need each other.
Instead of us being, top-down managers of a natural system, we can humble ourselves.
I mean, there's no way that you can't work with nature.
I farm in sync with nature. We raise cattle in sync with nature now. We no longer fight seasons.
So it's restoring a natural balance, and the biggest thing that we've really learned is that it sequesters carbon in the soil. So it removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and it actually fixes it in the soil, and it keeps it in the soil.
When we get the soil right, everything corrects itself.
True health begins with the soil. And if you have healthy soil, you have healthy pastures. If you have healthy pastures, you have healthy livestock. If you have healthy livestock, what they are producing is a healthy food.
We farm this way because we recognize the connection between our own health, our family, and the earth and what we eat.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back, and that goes back, of course, to the soil.
It's all connected. I prefer not to use any pesticides at all, as I'm pursuing a balance of life and a balanced ecosystem on the farm.
I really want to get rid of chemicals too, because there's people getting sick out here that weren't at one time.
This whole thing is about people.
My community, I really feel like I wouldn't be here without them. And so they are an integral part of my business plan.
I think you get into regenerative ag and you realize you're actually building things. This model allows for more people to be back on the land, not for you to have a job in town just to squeak by. Everything we do is building on itself and creating a legacy for the future, that we're leaving this better than we found it.
Callie and I get up every day and we sequester carbon. We get up every day and we make pollinator habitat. We clean water. We are rebuilding the resilience of the world. And that feels incredible and gives us tremendous hope to see how quickly it happens once you get the systems in place.
Regenerative agriculture is just watching how the land is actually healing on a regular basis from year to year.
There is no single piece of land that is the same. There's no single farmer. There's no single farm business. There's no single ecological or cultural community that is the same. And a regenerative farm would not just see that, but would grasp it as a source of innovation.
How do we measure our success? Do we look at earthworms and we smell it and we feel it? We also kind of look at how many insects are crawling around in our fields, how many birds are flying around above the fields, how the crops do.
We've seen the increase of pollinators, native pollinators over the last 7 years.
There's a lot more grass, different kinds of grasses that grow.
The first 2 years didn't see any worms in the soil. And this year, as I'm turning beds over and stuff, I'm seeing more and more.
Our water infiltration is off the map, We've made it through droughts, so, and we've had 2 or 3 7-year droughts, which is, to me, we're doing something right.
It's kind of miraculous how fast nature can work. It's only been 4 years and we have earthworms again.
We created topsoil in 1 season of grazing, 1 year of grazing. It's really quickly you can see profound changes.
I measure success in a lot of ways by, am I excited about what we're doing? And do I wake up each day wanting to be a part of what we're doing? And I think I measure the success of the direction we're heading by the the joy and passion that still goes along with that, even when sometimes they're really hard things.
We are seeing pretty great results, like as far as what I value, the health and vitality and the happiness of the animals and the happiness of the people. All those things are growing.
Hello everyone, my name is Suthai Teh and I'm part of the Global Peace Foundation in Malaysia. Today I'm going to share with you a unique program that we have embarked on with the indigenous people in Malaysia. This program is called Syntropic Agroforestry for the Indigenous People. Orang Asli, which means in Malay language, the original or first people in Malaysia, they're widely regarded as comprising our original inhabitants in Malaysia. The Orang Asli population is just about 200,000 people, or 0.6% of the Malaysian population. But despite such a small population, most Orang Asli people are marginalized and living impoverished. Roughly a third of them are living in hardcore poverty. The Orang Asli have subsisted throughout the history by engaging in farming and making use of natural resources. Traditionally, they are hunters and gatherers, and their livelihoods have relied on the forest for thousands of years. The forest provided them with food, as in vegetables and wildlife, shelter, materials to build their house, medicine, as well as various forest resources that generates income and economy for them. Unfortunately, heavy deforestation and clear cutting for large plantations have taken place surrounding many Orang Asli villages over the past few decades. That has given rise to various livelihood challenges for the Orang Asli. They no longer could harvest food, materials for housing, and their traditional economy was disrupted. Today, many of them have transitioned to cash crops farming such as rubber and oil palm trees. Many of them indeed are struggling farmers. During the COVID lockdown in 2020, we found many Orang Asli lost their incomes and some could not even put food on the table. They survived with very little and what's available in their village. Things like cassava, flour, rice with salt, and so on. Despite having patches of land in the village, most are not farming any food or variety enough for their consumption. The lockdown has revealed a very vulnerable situation of food insecurity among this community. And as we dive in deeper, we found out that food farming is very daunting for them despite their keen interest. Soil and ecosystem degradation, extreme weather, as well as lack of knowledge are some of the main reasons. So as we understood their challenges, we started to look for a solution, a farming method that would help rehabilitate their soil and ecosystem, farming that it's low input and reliance on chemical fertilizers, something that would suit their needs and lifestyle as well. We were very fortunate to have found Syntropic Agroforestry, a farming method started by a Swiss farmer in Brazil, Mr. Ernst Gotsch. Syntropic agroforestry is basically a regenerative farming that mimics the natural regeneration of the forest that provides yields at all stages of succession, and most importantly, generates its own fertility without reliance on external inputs. The end goal is a flourishing forest ecosystem. Some of the key practices includes mulching to cover the soil, planting in high density and diversity, intensive pruning, and no chemicals. As we introduce the syntropic farming to the Orang Asli, the response of the community is very encouraging, as the system would help restore the forest while meeting the need for food and materials for the community. We have thus far provided training for 133 farmers, and a third of them have started their own farm. And our team continues to mentor and support them as they grow their farm. 6 months after they've started their farm, we are really thrilled to see many formerly degraded lands in the villages are now becoming little food forests. They have harvested some short-term crops, such as various vegetables and fruits, for their own consumption, and some of them sell the excess too. Many of the farm has a consortium of short-term, medium-term, and long-term crops, and that would give them yields in various stages. This is Norma and her husband who work together in their farm. And Norma told us her farm is like her market. Every time she prepares her meal, she will walk into her farm and harvest what she needs to cook. She has very little reliance on buying from the market anymore. This is Zai, and Zai felt more secure for her children and grandchildren that they now have a thriving food forest that will provide them with food and they would not starve under any circumstances. For us, this is just a beginning. We are very hopeful that by connecting more and more Orang Asli, indigenous people, with regenerative farming method, they would be able to farm sustainably, restore their ecosystem and soil, as well as achieving food security in the long run. Thank you very much.
I'm Priscilla Nzamalu of Kibwezi, Kenya. I'm involved in permaculture food and nutrition security in the Arc of Food and Nutrition Sovereignty, AFANSO, since the year 2012. We train for transformation. We envision a future in which poor and vulnerable households have established livelihoods for posterity. Our mission is to journey with poor and vulnerable households and communities to the roots of food and nutrition sovereignty, while promoting social good, empowering communities to have sufficient food of value for active, healthy lives. We partner with others in this endeavor. Like-minded people link up with us, and we look at what communities make use of on a daily basis, especially land. We are using permaculture because it has been used to address a lot of the global issues. Bill Mollison said, all the problems in the earth can be solved in a garden. We have come to believe it can work, and it is true, because our established kitchen gardens have solved most of the community issues that we had, especially malnutrition. Some of the global issues at hand presently include pollution, global warming, soil loss, water and food shortages. I will focus my presentation with on the permaculture for regenerative livelihoods, focusing mainly on the soil, living soil. So I've said tons and tons of soils are lost every year through erosion, both wind and water. Our communities have been involved in the certification aggravation by cutting down trees to make charcoal, by leaving the soils bare, naked, so that the hot, especially in arid and semi-arid lands of Kenya, the heat, the tropical heat, scorches the land that's been left bare, killing our soils. The use of pesticides through conventional agriculture has also contributed to the death of most of our soils. The use of tractors due to the system of conventional agriculture has left a lot of our soils exposed. A lot of the microorganisms in the soils are exposed to the scorching sun that kills most of our soils. So our soils have been left dead. We are training our communities, and they are able now to differentiate between living and dead soils. They are able to now mulch their soils. They are able now to condition their soils using compost, using nitrogen fixers, and this way nature heals itself. Permaculture as a design science for holistic human settlement creates closed loop systems that are sustainable. There's less or no waste produced. Each of the elements in a system produces more energy than the energy inputs, and therefore there's always some surplus. We have at the core of our trainings the three ethics of permaculture: the care for the earth, the care for the people, and the fair share that surplus is produced. This can be sold, or communities or households earn fugitive income. We value affluence with abundance, so that we can say we have successful civilization when we gain more by not taking advantage of the existing or posterity. We also value mouth-to-mouth communication, the testimonies that come from people, the evidence that permaculture brings food to the table is one of the things we value. We also value positive energies. Any input, every drop counts in permaculture. Every small input from any anchor of the earth, it counts. Every little knowledge that is gained counts. So we also value real knowledge, where we unlearn and learn ourselves. By knowing the extent of our ignorance, then we can ask or gain skills and knowledge to improve our bird spaces. We also value real people, people that really contribute positively to the growth and development of our communities are of importance to us. We value also right livelihoods, that communities and individuals and households can do what they want. We also value seed, because this is our future currency. In the food web and food chains, eating and being eaten starts with the soil, because it's from the soil that the primary producers, the plants, grow. The earth cannot support us if it's dead. So we have to take care of our soils. We train our farmers to take care of their soils, to learn and unlearn themselves, to correct or right the wrongs that conventional agriculture and damaging systems have created in our soils and planet Earth. Our communities are now able to bring food to the table. We have families that spend weeks and months without visiting the markets, yet they survive. They are able to eat through permaculture. Our dead soils have been brought alive. With those people that have been involved in permaculture, they have conditioned our soils through mulching, through composting, through ensuring that the soils are moist. Our communities are able to differentiate between dead and living soil, dust and soil. We have more microorganisms brought into the soils. Even for people living in rocky areas, soil has been created through mulching, through the use of organic matter. We are healing deserts. We are turning lawns to edible landscapes. We are happy that there's more food and dietary diversity through biodiversity, through the preservation of seeds, through the use of seeds, through the use of every part of the plant. We are happy that soils are being built. We are happy that we can make a difference in the deserts. We are happy that even in our semi-arid and arid lands, people can depend on themselves for food, not depending on governments and corporate systems that are fragile. We are happy that we are creating United Nations in our different corners of the world. Thank you.
Do you want to reverse climate change and save our one and only Mother Earth? So then, let us plan for the planet and people. I strongly believe that healing our land is the best way of healing the people and to become good stewards of all God's creation too. I am Praxedes Embalsado, baby for short, and I am a native of Carcar City, Cebu, Philippines. I was born from a parents who for all their lives been tilling the soil for our family sustenance. We are 12 siblings and I am the 11th one. We all grew up in the farming village of Barangay Kalignan, helping our parents in various farm works. And now I have my own family with one child who is 4 years old. To continue my farming legacy that I grew up with and to pursue my love and passion in farming, I studied Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, major in horticulture from the Visayas State University, one of our government's own agricultural schools. I learned so much about how nature has been devastated through the use of synthetic and inappropriate farming techniques that we adapted from other countries to advance our modern agriculture technologies. Over the years, most of our new generation farmers have discarded the ancient farm practices that have been handed down by our ancestors, except the indigenous people of our country. Personally, starting from my childhood days until the present, I have witnessed how fast our soil and the whole ecosystem of farm and food being degraded. As a result, all of us are experiencing now the consequences of climate change, most especially me in my farming journey. Despite these challenging times, burdened more by fuel and food crisis and lack of manpower to farm, I am still determined to pursue my farming career. Through this, I'm able to contribute in my own little way in restoring nature by applying natural and organic farming practices and other sustainable farming techniques that can regenerate the soil and the whole ecosystem in my farm and in other farms who ask for my help and are sincere and committed to make a change. This is my humble garden, named as Nathan's Leaven Garden. This is a vacant and barren land before and served as pasture of cattle and carabao for many years, Only kugun and other creeping grasses were growing here. I started with a small portion of this land and expanded it little by little as the soil was becoming more and more fertile. While I am gradually expanding, I am constantly challenged by extreme weather conditions like typhoons, El Nino, La Nina, pest infestation, lack of water supply sometimes, and lack of manpower also. In augmenting each other's need for farm help, there are times that in our community, I resorted to partnering with other parent farmers in sharing the caring of each other's children and working on the gardens for them to expose in organic gardening too. We are all doing our best to generate income for our families from farming. We remain motivated to continue producing healthy food, processing or value-adding food products, and finding better markets for all our organic produce. We know that we need to collaborate and coordinate more with each other. In working together to promote organic farming practices, we recently organized the Participatory Guarantee System Subo. Subo is a local name of Cebu Province. Through PGS Subo, we aim to have organic certification for farms through a participatory approach. This is an alternative certification scheme promoting organic and sustainable culture in the Philippines so that our organic practicing farmers are acknowledged and recognized for their work in keeping food and planet safe and healthy. PGS Cebu is a quality assurance initiative of organic producers, consumers, and advocates, ensuring integrity of organic products. It requires the active participation of all stakeholders to bring about a shared vision to guide the operation of PGS Cebu, adapt standards and norms, promote the values and biodiversity, environmental protection, social justice, affordability, fairness, empowerment, transparency, health, and respect for cultural differences. Our members include key stakeholders such as small farm producers, consumers, advocates, academics, traders, NGOs, local government units, or government organization, and churches in throughout of the province of Cebu, Philippines. Our vision is by 2027, PGS Cebu is a highly recognized partner of farmers, consumers, private and political institution in Region 7 that aims to transform the production and consumption patterns of food into becoming a holistic and sustainable system geared towards restoring nature. As soon as we have 5 accredited farms, the PGS Cebu would already be an organic certifying body or OCB. We would already be authorized to certify other farms and products. This is a great opportunity for the organic farmers to have their farm certified at a lesser expense. Despite this inexpensive way of getting organic certification, we still find it hard to have access funds to spend for training, farm coaching, and farm inspection. Farmer members of PGS Cebu are supported by a growing market of consumers who understand better the true value of cooking and eating organically grown food. These are individuals, families, eateries who have discovered our farmers and their produce at the weekly Cebu Farmers Market throughout Cebu City. Having this access to growing and supportive market helps not only to sustain the practice of organic farming, but encourages conventional practicing farmers to convert to more organic and regenerative farming practices. The circle of transforming the food ecosystem and culture in Cebu is complete. We know that all of this is a tall order for us. We understand, but we pursue. We will pursue. We continue to do this the best we can with love and passion. So in our own little ways, we may contribute in restoring nature to its better shape. If not in our time, at least we begin the restoration process and delay its further devastation. There is no other time but now. By doing all of this, and together with all like-minded citizens of the world, we can save Mother Earth from further destruction, reverse climate change, and create a healthier and brighter generation. It is our fervent hope and prayer that all of us who are in the same direction will continue to strive for a sustainable, balanced environment. Yes, obstacles will always be on our way. Some are even hard hits, but this should not stop us. These are no other sectors who have greater interest and impact on the future of our beloved planet than ours, farmers and environmentalists to heal nature. We accept this as our mission to accomplish for our beloved Mother Earth and the people. So let us take all up the challenge no matter what and spread the love and light to everyone. Thank you and God bless us all.
I am the soil. Throughout the world, I've been degraded, used for food and fiber, but not cared for. I've been treated like dirt. Today, I'm only half of what I was 100 years ago. But there is hope. Amidst the rolling hills of Pennsylvania, a group of farmers and scientists recognize that I'm alive, that I am a miracle, teeming with billions of microorganisms, bacteria, and fungi that form the basis of life on our planet. There at Rodale Institute, they're teaching farmers across the world to heal me, to bring me back to life, to harness the power of nature, because humans cannot survive without soil. In their labs, they're developing new solutions that don't rely on the toxic chemicals that make me sick. In their fields, they're discovering my power to combat climate change. In their trials, they're harnessing my ability to produce healthy food. And they are spreading the word to beginning farmers, to policymakers, to scientists, and to consumers like you. Will you join them? I am the soil. Today I am broken, but with your help, I can be renewed, restored, regenerated. I can be healed, and life on Earth can flourish.
Hello and welcome to Rodale Institute. Here on our 386-acre experimental organic farm headquarters and at our regional resource centers around the globe, we are putting the science behind how we can heal our soil. My name is Nadine Clopton, and I'm Rodale Institute's program manager, as well as serving as vice president on the Global NGO Executive Committee. It's an honor to be here and to share more about the essential work of Rodale Institute and pathways towards a regenerative future with you. Regeneration is not a buzzword. It's not a marketing tactic or a trend. In its true form, regeneration is a way of being, a mindset, a practice, a way of relating as part of a greater ecosystem. It is anchored in an ethos of care. To practice regeneration is an act of devotion to the healing of Mother Earth and all creatures that live upon her. At Rodale Institute, regeneration is something we strive to live and breathe and share with the world. Of course, regeneration's not new. It's been the way of life for Indigenous cultures around the globe for millennia. And we must look to these communities as leaders and learn from their example of how to live in right relationship with the earth as stewards and as caretakers. Yet, in pursuit of exponential growth, our systems of extraction, exploitation, and degeneration bring us to an inflection point like never before in human history, where we need principles like regeneration to transform how we treat our planet and one another. There is no one-size-fits-all solution to the challenges we find ourselves facing today. but local communities and ecologies each have a unique part to play in our collective march towards a world of food sovereignty and regeneration. Beyond sustainability, regeneration asks what is asking to be healed, renewed, and restored. Development cannot be sustained if it is not anchored in repairing the harm we have caused while working to live in harmony with Earth's natural systems. A solution to a myriad of challenges we face lives right beneath our feet. There is so much to learn from nature if we take time to stop, listen, and learn from Mother Earth herself. We have the privilege that future generations do not, to choose a different path than the one we are on. Life in soil begins first with decay, compost. Think of a forest padded with freshly fallen leaves, smelling distinctly of autumn. Those leaves will be broken down by all sorts of critters and fungi to go through the composting process and become the basis of life, soil. In that soil, enriched by compost and what is decaying, seeds will land and germinate and take root. Acorns will become great oaks. And there are two questions I invite you to sit with. One, what is ready to be composted? And two, what seeds are we planting? Our current food, healthcare, and farming systems are ripe for the compost heap. We're exceeding our planetary boundaries and living in feedback loops of food systems that make us sick and healthcare systems that keep us sick. For years, farmers have been led to believe, through no fault of their own, that pesticides, herbicides, and synthetic fertilizers are the best way to grow crops and amend the soil. Through these practices, we are degrading our topsoil. In addition, 30% of the world's arable land has become unproductive in the last 40 years due to overuse, depletion of vital nutrients, and soil erosion related to the high use of synthetic inputs and practices such as tillage. Science tells us that we have around 55 years left of healthy topsoil before humanity is faced with a food scarcity and soil health crisis of epic proportions if we were to continue along with business as usual. For context, in 55 years, I'll be 80. My children will be in their 50s, my grandchildren likely in their 20s. It's not some far-off dystopia in the year 3000. It's visceral and real. Above all, it is an incredible, humbling opportunity to choose another path. It requires humanity to pause, to feel, and to remember our responsibility to care for one another across generations and be conscious stewards of our planet. Now, I could focus an entire dissertation on what is broken, far beyond the bounds of a half-hour fireside chat. But I'd rather invite you along on your own regeneration journey as it relates to healing our soil, our systems, and ultimately, ourselves. So let's begin reimagining our world from the soil up. At Rodale Institute, our work for the past 75 years has been in service to cultivating a regenerative future. Our founder, J.I. Rodale, once wrote a simple yet powerful statement on a chalkboard that's still at the core of our mission. Healthy soil equals healthy food equals healthy people. While the health of our soil has been rapidly degrading, so has the health of our inner terrain. Incidences of chronic and autoimmune disease are on the rise, paralleling a rise in both processed foods and in the use of synthetic chemical pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers. Both our gut microbiome and our soil microbiome rely on microbial biodiversity to thrive. Conventional farming practices, such as the use of synthetic chemical inputs and heavy tillage, have degraded the health of both of these microbiomes. Soil is alive, and it needs us to drastically change our course. Mother Earth is the ultimate soil health expert. A gram of healthy soil can hold up to 10 billion microbes, and 78 antibacterial agents and 60 cancer drugs approved between 1983 and 1994 had their origins in the soil. Rodale Institute's Vegetable Systems Trial, a comparison research trial, studies conventional and regenerative organic farming methods on 5 different vegetables. And throughout the study, 26 different polyphenols, micronutrients, phytonutrients, and amino acids are being tested over the years to evaluate key nutrient density metrics and to deepen the link between the health of our soil and people. Soil health is interwoven with our ability to counteract climate change, to sequester carbon, cultivate agroecological resilience, enhance nutrient density of foods, to relocalize economies and food sheds, create food security, and regenerate the health of humanity, among many other benefits. Data from our Farming Systems Trial 40-year report, which was just released, demonstrates that regenerative organic farming methods have the power to enhance agroecological resilience to extreme weather patterns such as drought and floods, which is especially relevant in the Global South, which bears the heaviest burdens due to climate change. Healthy soil has the potential to offset around 8% of annual greenhouse gas emissions. At Rodale Institute, we are bridging the gap between soil health, planetary health, and human health. Just last month, we hosted doctors, nurses, and other healthcare practitioners on the farm for 4 days at the Regenerative Healthcare Conference to bridge the gap between healthcare and agriculture, creating a community of practice around the concept of regenerative healthcare. And by focusing on healing our soil, we can impact a wide array of challenges we're facing, including with our own health. It's time we think in webs, not silos. Here to help us discuss why soil health is imperative to cultivating a regenerative future is Rodale Institute CEO, Jeff Moyer. So Jeff, you've been an organic farmer for the past 40 years and now serve as CEO of Rodale Institute. Now, we've seen the exacerbation of issues such as food insecurity and climate change. And my question for you is, what have you seen in that space? And how does Rodale Institute offer really potent solutions for those challenges?
Well, Nadine, I think you're absolutely right. There are problems with our current food system. It is broken. It's broken for many reasons and in many places, most particularly because we have policies in place that really inhibit farmers from making dramatic changes on their farm, sometimes changes that they'd like to make or that they see need to be made. And we've sort of lost focus of this idea that soil health impacts human health and climate health. We've divorced ourselves from the soil, and that's made it easy to grow crops as commodities. Many farmers don't see themselves as food producers, they're simply commodity growers. And when we reshift that paradigm and get farmers to think about what they're doing and why they're doing it, then they can focus more easily on soil health and make those links to human health. So what Rodale Institute is doing is we're creating the science, which is the backbone of decision-making on farms, so that we can give farmers the science-based information that they need to make decisions and changes on their farm. And then we also have an educational component or an educational arm to our farm, which is sort of outreach and education that helps farmers make those decisions on their farm, gives them the tools that they need. And now we even have a consulting arm, which will go out to farms, sit down with a farmer in his or her kitchen or farm office to, again, help them make the right decisions, design their farm so it can be successful, not simply from a yield standpoint, but also from the standpoint of producing the kinds of food products that Americans and people around the country need.
So how can we cultivate a more regenerative future through reassessing how we farm and through focusing on soil health? And what is Rodale doing to really cultivate that regenerative future?
Well, if you go back in history to when J.I. Rodale first started talking about organic, he made this profound statement. He said, healthy soil equals healthy food equals healthy people. And what he was challenging us to do as farmers is not to just grow food, not just to manage the soil, but to produce healthy people. So what we need to do is use tools in our production models that make people healthy. So for example, there's no amount of salt-based fertilizer or poisons that we use to kill weeds or insects that we can put into a system that'll make people healthy. So why would we use that tool? So I think what makes me so proud about the work that Rodale Institute is doing is we're really leaders in this area of farming without tools that make people sick, and sort of incorporating tools and really modern science to get farmers to where they need to be. So for example, organic isn't looking backwards, it's looking to the future. So we're very much a forward-thinking organization using modern no-till agriculture, ag engineering, using drone technology, using robotics, all the tools that we have at our disposal that don't negatively impact human health or planetary health, we'll gladly put to work. But then tools that make people sick or destroy components of the planet, we wouldn't use. And so assembling a team of scientists like we have here and outreach folks who can design that message and then carry it out to the public is what Rodale does really well.
Absolutely. where do you see that we can most learn from nature in driving the solutions that we need for fixing our food systems, for fixing our own health? Where would you say that that inspiration can be derived?
Well, it's funny you use the word inspiration. We here at Rodale Institute always say that our farms are a destination for inspiration, because the first step in getting anybody to change or make a change in either in their food purchasing or in their food production model is to inspire them to do something. And so we need to be inspirational here at Rodale Institute. We also inspire other scientists to work with us. And everything that we do here at Rodale is done in partnership with land-grant universities, with private industry, with corporations, and with private individuals to try and make a difference in the way our food system is managed so that we can make substantive changes. I always tell people, once you know something, you can't unknow it. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. So once we get people to visualize what we're seeing and inspire them to change, then we know that change is going to happen, because you can't stop people from doing good work.
So in closing, why is it important for global leaders in sustainable development to really understand regenerative organic principles and practices?
Well, regenerative organic principles and practices are the guidelines that we set for ourselves to make change. So it's really critical that policymakers, that global leaders in the government agencies or in the for-profit world understand the direction that we're trying to head, so that they can bring all of their resources and their capacities into making sure that that change becomes a reality.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and to contribute to the Nature for Life Hub.
My pleasure to be with you. Thank you. The Rodale Institute is a nonprofit research and education facility that works in the area of organic farming. And what we're really trying to do is create opportunities for farmers to have a positive impact on the soil that they're working, have a positive impact on their community, and have a positive impact on the planet.
We have the capacity to transform not only the way we farm, but what and how we eat. We're literally changing the way food is produced around the world. And we're doing that by putting hard science to this idea of organic agriculture.
In the last 50 to 70 years, the adoption of chemical conventional agricultural approach has depleted and degraded our soils. It has caused chemicals to get into our food system, and quite honestly, it's made us sick. We like to say that our research is a catalyst for change. We have 3 research priorities: expanding regenerative organic agriculture, reducing the impacts of climate change, and solving food insecurity by growing healthier food.
We need more organic farmers. We need them to be successful. And here at the Rodale Institute, we are training the next generation of farmers. Students learn a variety of skills while they're here at the farm. They can learn about livestock management. They can learn about vegetable production, apiary management, and how to run the business of a farm.
Regenerative organic agriculture is a farming production system that focuses on the ideas and concepts around continuous improvement.
By adopting regenerative practices, we have the opportunity to not only feed people, but feed people food that's healthy, that makes them healthy, and at the same time improves the environment.
The Farming Systems Trial is the longest running side-by-side comparison of organic and conventional farming systems. It's about 40 years old. This research is very useful, not just for organic farmers, but conventional growers as well. What we found was that there is no statistical difference in yields between the organic and conventional system. In fact, when there's drought, organic system is producing 31% more yields than the conventional system. That's why I'm excited, because I know that what we are trying to promote here can actually feed the world.
The Vegetable Systems Trial is a trial to compare the nutritional quality in vegetables produced side by side in conventional and organic systems. We want to prove that the nutrient quality is improved by improving the soil health.
For more than 260 years, industrial hemp was a major crop in Pennsylvania. We know that it has over 25,000 uses. Hemp can be used for many things. There's fiber, which we have here. It can be used for clothing, rope, and building material. Being able to replace other products with hemp is a benefit because farming hemp is much more sustainable.
What drives me and what drives the work of Rodale Institute is the fact that our work literally holds in it one of the solutions to the world's greatest problems right now. If we fix the way we farm, we heal so many dimensions of our planet and humanity.
There's a lot of reasons to be hopeful for the future. We can have a positive impact on climate change, a positive impact on soil degradation. We can even improve the wages of farm workers in rural communities around the world. Looking into the future, we're very optimistic because the future is organic.
Because the future is organic.
Because the future is organic.
So we're joined by Dan Kemper, who is Rodale Institute's master trainer. He trains countless cohorts of our farmer training interns, and they become the farmers of the future. So Dan, thank you for joining us. Farm workers are disproportionately exposed to harmful toxins and synthetic inputs in our food production system, which creates adverse health outcomes both for farm workers, consumers, and for the soil that the food is grown in. So Dan, as a farmer yourself and as a trainer of farmers of the future, can you speak to the importance of empowering farmers with the knowledge of regenerative organic agricultural methods and how that has the power to transform our food system?
The way that I see it is that we have a goal in farming. We want to make food, and that's been the goal for a while now. But what we're seeing is that not every technique is really paying off the way that we expected. A lot of adverse effects, like you just mentioned, on the soil, on the ecosystem, on the individual that's even working on the farm. So what regenerative organic really is just a new set of tools. So we're still after the same goal. We still want to make food, we want healthy, nutritious food, and we want anyone to go hungry. So we can do that with the tools that we have instead of the alternatives of maybe herbicide and chemical burn downs and things like that. Having these different tools allows us to choose which one we want to use. And when we have a consumer that wants to buy the product that follows those techniques and practices, we have to have something that tells them that, which is why organic certification exists. And again, why regenerative organic certification exists. So it's a new set of tools, but it's not really that new. We've been using them for a while, but coming back into a market that was heavily fertilizer, pesticide, herbicide-based production. So it's really, again, the same goal with a different set of tools that's better for us, better for the individual, better for the earth.
So regenerative organic agriculture is not a one-size-fits-all solution, but rather is intimately connected to our local ecology. So what would you hope to communicate to decision makers who are contemplating how to apply regenerative organic agriculture on a global scale? And how can we ensure that small local farmers are centered in driving those solutions?
So what I would say is that if we want to support agriculture, there's obviously the direct path of kind of giving out funding or working directly with farmers to help them. But what I would want to communicate is that this is not just an agricultural issue. And so what we want to do is we want to look at a lot of other topics in politics that are affecting agriculture, as in the supply chain, whether that is with receiving resources or sending food out. I think that it's really important to understand that it's not just one pillar, but multiple pillars in our society that are holding everybody up. So we see issues in what's happening with agriculture, but a lot of those answers are laying outside of agriculture as far as like shipping or availability, land use, different types of government funded or subsidies. So I think that there is an enormous amount that's just outside the border of agriculture that people really need to understand is heavily influencing agriculture. We can't just look right at the bullseye, we have to look at the entire target.
That's really well said. So it sounds like we need almost, a common thread through this specific fireside chat is we really need to think in webs, not in silos, because we can often get so hung up on, okay, this fits in this bucket, this fits in that bucket, but realistically, everything is interconnected.
Absolutely, and it takes everything to kind of hold it up. I really like a pillar system because when you have a pillar crumble, that completely dissolves the integrity of the entire building. So when we have an issue elsewhere and we're looking at one pillar and not the rest of them, we might be missing that one's falling apart.
Absolutely, very, very well said. And so where do you think small and diversified farmers fit into that picture, and how can we ensure when there are things like global or national implementation, how can we make sure that small farmers are not left behind, and not only not left behind, but that they're centered in that process?
Sure. I think that the more people to a voice, the louder that voice is. And so when you look at certain farmers that are starting cooperatives or getting banded together in different types of committees or regional associations, it's giving them a lot more of a voice and a lot more power to try to influence some of the laws that are happening here. So the small farmer, on 10 acres or less, very little voice just in doing that. Of course, they can influence their direct community, but when a bunch of these people band together, obviously that voice and that vibration through the world is much, much stronger, and therefore banding together and becoming associated with each other, again, a web, not silos, like you say, We don't want to silo off our own information, our own passion, because we want to be the best at market. We really got to work together to get that voice and bring these regional players back into a global system.
Absolutely. And, speaking of regional players, with climate change being the way it is right now, of course, the effects of climate change are not equitably distributed around the world. There are places that are really facing a lot of consequences as it relates to droughts, floods. So how have you seen, as a farmer, regenerative organic practices allow for more crop resilience compared to some conventional models?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest and biggest answer is going to be your organic matter in your soil, the ability for the soil to hold water and remain porous to allow it to drain through. There's a lot to be said about that. A lot of our projects like FST show how well we do in a drought situation, organic versus conventional. And it's really the very first thing is the organic matter in your soil. We build that and we can find a lot of good benefits from that, especially with dealing with climate issues and having to go around that. We're still farmers trying to make our profit, but we need to figure out a way to weather that storm. And so when we build the soil, when we build the organic matter, we find that we have more drought resistance.
Well, that's exciting to hear, and I think gives us all hope.
Thanks. Good. I'm glad.
Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Regenerative organic agriculture is a step up from organic agriculture.
Because it mitigates climate change, it makes the system more resilient, it has less environmental impact, and it produces crops and foods that are healthier.
But it does require a radical approach to farming, because for too long, an extractive and exploitative mindset has maintained a stronghold in agriculture.
And Rodale Institute is at the tip of the spear for driving that message and always being the one place to go for farmers, consumers, and organic advocates to be able to find trusted information that they can rely on.
Rodale Institute's cutting-edge science, its engaging education, and its consulting are unlike anything being offered to farmers and consumers in the world right now. The world is looking to us for answers. The world is looking to us for solutions and for guidance on this new paradigm of farming called regenerative organic agriculture.
The science and the research we conduct here, and we will continue to conduct, these are the lighthouse that it will really help people to be guided to where the future should be.
What I want to see is the mobilization of our research and the work that we've done over the last 75 years. I think now that we have an awesome foundation based on the research that we've done, it's time to instill this knowledge into the new people that are coming into farming.
The times we're living in can often feel overwhelming, and that overwhelm can lead to apathy. Yet here at Rodale Institute, I feel hope. Regenerative organic agriculture provides a roadmap for resilience. It's a powerful tool for addressing the multiple intersecting challenges we are facing. When we care about the well-being of one another, of our soil and our water, and of future generations, change becomes the natural next course of action. So I invite you to once again ask yourself, what is being composted? And most importantly, what seeds are you planting? Thank you.
Restoring and sustainably managing forests is essential to our future. Forests are responsible for half of our global oxygen. They sustain more than 1 billion livelihoods. They sustain 75% of our drinking water, and they sequester about 30% of all greenhouse gas emissions. In this next segment, we'll take a look at pathways of sustainable forest management from different perspectives, including from global organizations such as the Food and Agriculture Organization and the International Tropical Timber Organization, as well as others. So let's hear what they have to say.
Hello everyone, and today I would like to talk to you about the necessity of sustainable forestry in the tropics, a pathway to sustainable development. We are living in unprecedented times. First, we had the outflow and the aftermath of the pandemic. There have been armed conflicts and disturbances in world peace. As a consequence, we have suffered disrupted supply chains, huge rates of inflation and currency rate ratios exchanges, extreme weather events, ecosystem degradation, and all this cumulatively has resulted in an urgent need for higher awareness of the need for sustainable development. Who is the International Tropical Timber Organization? We are the sole governmental organization focused entirely on tropical forest resources. The ITTO members cover 80% of global tropical forests, and this membership accounts for 90% of trade in tropical forest products. The organization has a dual mandate to promote the sustainable management and conservation of tropical forests, and to promote the expansion and diversification of trade in tropical timber from sustainably managed and legally harvested forests. The organization is based in the city of Yokohama, hosted by the government of Japan. There are several examples of international commitments on sustainability which directly relate to forests, and of course this includes tropical forests. The ones I wish to highlight for your edification would be the G7 Ministers for Climate, Energy and the Environment, which held a meeting in Berlin in September of this year. We have the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forests and Land Use from November 2021, resulting from the COP26. There is also the United Nations High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, which is an annual event. We have the Paris Agreement, of course, which is tied to the current negotiations on the Climate Change Accord. We have the Convention on Biological Diversity. We have the Global Environment Facility. And finally, we have the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals. This list, of course, is non-exhaustive. Tropical forests sits at the core of the Sustainable Development Goals, and it is crucial for human well-being. Forests are essential for life on Earth. 31% of the planet's land surface consists of forests. Forests are among the world's most productive land-based ecosystems. It is estimated that 1.6 billion people globally depend on forests for their subsistence. Tropical forests represents 45% of global forests. Nonetheless, the threat to forests, particularly tropical forests, continue. Deforestation and forest degradation are reported to be continuing. Major drivers of tropical deforestation continue to be activities that favor competing land uses that produce higher and more rapid financial returns. And these sectors that compete for forest land use are agriculture, energy, mining, and infrastructure. Illegal logging, wood fuel collection, the fragmentation of disturbances from insects, disease, and severe weather events and wildfires are also a consequence. The escalating impacts of climate change and biodiversity loss can never be underestimated. And there is also a question whether tropical forestry is actually misunderstood. Forest-based enterprises and international trade add value to the existence and longevity of tropical forests and can contribute positively and significantly to sustainable economies and livelihoods. The share of tropical wood in major markets is affected, of course, by the negative environmental image of tropical wood and misconception. However, its substitution by non-tropical wood and non-renewable materials, non-environmentally friendly materials, such as plastics, non-wood laminates, concrete, and metals, needs to be reconsidered. Consumer markets are overlooking the significant benefits of tropical forest products as a renewable and environmentally friendly resource. Sustainable tropical forestry, from the ITTO's point of view, is key in meeting future demands and the SDGs. The world population is projected to reach 9.7 billion by 2050. Competition for land use, of course, is predicted to intensify. And at the same time, this will also accelerate demand for forest products and ecosystem services. The sustainable management of productive forests in the tropics and a sustainable tropical timber trade can contribute positively to future wood demand and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Moving forward, of course, there are needs that need to be addressed in ensuring the implementation of sustainable forest management in the tropics. Primarily, sustainable strategic investments in forests are critical for promoting transformative changes and inclusive solutions to steer restoration and conservation, forest management, viable forest-based industries, and a sustainable timber trade towards a circular bioeconomy. The tropical wood products industry also needs transformative public and private investments to promote the sustainable production and consumption with an enabling environment for private investments aimed at sustainable profits. Sustainable business development involving wood and non-wood forest products, as well as a wide range of ecosystem services, will enable local communities and indigenous peoples and smallholders to improve their livelihoods. Moving forward, the key elements that need to be considered are the role and contribution of sustainably managed tropical forests supported by landscape restoration in the tropics to overcome climate challenges. This must be recognized and fully supported. Increased governance and enforcement, of course, is essential for the positive and effective implementation of sustainable forest management, while contributing to legal and sustainable supply chains and enriching livelihoods and the empowerment of communities. Multi-stakeholder involvement and gender parity are equally critical. The empowerment in decision-making will result in social, environmental, and economic benefits being positive contributions to the Global Forest Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals. As a result of all this, increasing public awareness that harvesting wood sustainably is simply not deforestation, whilst the global community stimulates the appreciation for legal and sustainable timber supply chains. While we are at it, please do take a look at the International Tropical Timber Organization's website. URL is www.ittto.int. I hope I have given you a snapshot of how much tropical forestry can do for people and the planet.
Hello to everyone, all citizens of the only one planet we have. We are delighted to have you with us to this FAO event, which is part of the Nature for Life Hub. I'm Sylvie Watts, agronomist, resilience advisor in the FAO Emergency and Resilience Office. I'm going to facilitate this event called Forest-Based Solution for Building Resilient Agri-Food Systems. It is a co-production from the FAO Forestry and Resilience team. Today, the global and interconnected climate, biodiversity, pollution, and health crisis affects and threatens everyone, everywhere, across all sectors, but more especially the agri-food sectors, the agri-food system, which when coupled with regional and local crises, especially conflicts, is driving the increase in food insecurity. Agriculture absorbs more than 26% of the overall impact caused by medium to large scale disaster and climate-related disasters. This is increased to up to 80% if we only consider drought. Such disaster and crisis and the related damages and loss are contributing to increasing in migration, displacement, damaging livelihood, damaging infrastructure and assets, increasing hunger and inequalities, along with affecting the overall health and food security, but also security overall. Globally, if you've seen the latest report, what we call the Global Food Crisis Report, food insecurity is on a record high. It's driven by a deadly mix of conflict and climate change related extreme events, economic shocks, and also aggravated by COVID-19 pandemic. As stressed during the UN Food Systems Summit that concluded in 2021, we were saying that the global food system is failing to meet the human needs equitably and sustainably. Agri-food system must urgently transition and transform from being a problem driving climate crisis, biodiversity crisis, deforestation, land degradation, desertification, to becoming one of the main climate solutions and helping societies to transform for ensuring food security and well-being for all. We consider that more than 4 billion people are part of the agri-food system. Small-scale farmers, herders, fishers, forest dwellers, food workers, and their families are central for achieving sustainable development, as they are providing more than 80% of the food supply in large part of the developing world. This is the attention we would like to point on today. At the same time, these smallholders, they are on the front lines of disaster, climate change, biodiversity degradation, socioeconomic shocks, and conflicts. And they are often among the world's the most poor and the most food insecure, because they are struggling to access to technologies, capacities, and finance to adapt or to transform their livelihood and to become full agents of change and for resilience and sustainability. Resilience building is a system approach, which is done through a complex, not complex, but a complementary suite of risk and impact management action, including the analysis, evidence, monitoring, planning, investment, and careful monitoring. The suite of disaster, climate risk, and impact management action include many types of action. And resilience is really built through the implementation of all these suite of actions all together. It includes agroclimatic and disaster risk information, food security monitoring and information, coupled with early warning system that triggers anticipatory action, disaster climate risk governance, which is all decision making at all levels, from central level to community level, risk transfer, such as insurance and social protection, applying resilient good practices at farm and firm along the food value chain, risk proofing of infrastructures, reducing food loss and waste, adopting healthy diets, and last but not least, and central to our event today, the nature-based solution, in this case, forest-based solution. Let us watch a short video of the FAO in emergency and resilience work that can capture the focus on hunger and food crisis situation.
Have you ever wondered why, in this day and age, some communities constantly face extreme hunger? There's a common saying that goes, give a person a fish and they will have dinner for the night, but teach them to fish and they'll never have to worry about food again. It sounds easy enough, but what happens in the event of a disaster? Like if the lake dries up. Nearly 80% of the people on our planet live in rural areas and rely on some form of agricultural production for their livelihoods. Floods, droughts, conflict, pandemics, these types of disasters can have massive impacts, not only on fields and crops, but also on agricultural assets and infrastructure, leaving people's livelihoods in tatters and leaving rural communities even more vulnerable. In fact, just one planting season or harvest can change their lives forever. This is why emergency livelihoods assistance is so important as a frontline humanitarian intervention. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations is on the ground, helping communities to anticipate disasters, responding with life-saving aid when disasters strike, and helping affected families and communities move towards a lasting recovery. Emergency food assistance is vital, but we must do more to win the battle against hunger. Building livelihoods and agri-food systems that are resilient to shocks are at the core of FAO's humanitarian work. Through a combination of short and medium-term actions, FAO is providing desperately needed livelihoods assistance so rural communities can continue to produce and access food locally by implementing anticipatory actions ahead of disasters to reduce the impact when they hit, by investing in local people and economies through cash transfers, voucher schemes, and cash for work programs, and by equipping people with tools and resources to provide for themselves, including displaced populations. Agricultural production is possible and effective even in dark times. We know this at FAO because we have done this. With the right support at the right time, small-scale food producers can protect their livelihoods and their communities and stand stronger against future threats.
Right. And this is a video showing food crisis and humanitarian assistance. And this is where the centrality of the resilience work, preventing, anticipating risk, absorbing the risk and the impact, adapting to it for transforming the livelihoods, the agri-food system livelihoods, it's very, very important. This is why centrality of forest-based solution, nature-based solution is part of this resilience agenda. So we believe at FAO that working all together to manage this multiple risk and crisis that affects and threaten our agri-food system is at the core for building resilience and for securing food for everyone, present and future generation. We'll now like to take you to some other example of our work where from the food crisis and the responding to the emergencies, the centrality of the longer term forest-based and nature-based solution is really helping people to anticipate and manage multiple shock and stresses. And we would like to take you on this example of the Great Green Wall Initiative, which is in the Sahel region. As you probably know, in the Sahel, we have many, many millions of people suffering from regular, acute, and chronic food insecurity and malnutrition. And this is where the work on fighting desertification, managing the ecosystem, restoring land and the forest cover and the pasture is so central for the resilience of the people, generating income, food security, and securing their livelihoods. Now let's watch this great example, well-known example of the Great Green Wall initiatives that takes us from the Sahel region to the Horn of Africa region, also covering part of the north of Africa in this sort of a green belt formation creation. Let's watch that work.
Si nous observons ce panorama du Sahel, on remarque qu'il y a moins de végétation et c'est en train de diminuer d'année en année. Moi, dans ma réflexion, la Grande Muraille Verte, ça doit faire beaucoup plus que des plantations d'arbres. Et ça donne l'opportunité de voir comment on peut apporter les plantes utiles aux communautés Le modèle de restauration que nous avons conçu comporte les communautés qui sont au cœur de la restauration.
Quand vous allez impliquer la population, ils sentiront que c'est des actions qui sont les leurs.
On fait la formation des techniciens villageois qui sont formés sur les techniques de collecte des semences.
On veut que la restauration des sols là continue. Parce que, premièrement, rien n'est plus profitable que de trouver des terres cultivables.
Ces graines seront utilisées pour la restauration d'environ 3000 hectares de terres dégradées au Niger cette année. Aussi, une zone de superficie similaire est en cours de restauration de l'autre côté de la frontière au Burkina Faso. Nous utilisons deux méthodes différentes pour la restauration. La première est que les communautés préparent la terre manuellement. La méthode traditionnelle ici dans le Sahel est de creuser des demi-lunes qui aident à capturer et à retenir l'eau de pluie. Mais actuellement, c'est une course contre le temps de tout planter pendant les 3 mois de la saison des pluies et le travail manuel seul ne peut pas couvrir toutes les zones. De sorte que nous utilisons également la composante mécanisée, ce qui est absolument essentiel. Actuellement, nous avons 2 machines travaillant au Burkina Faso. Cette technologie mécanisée a été développée pour imiter la demi-lune traditionnelle. Sur 1 hectare, vous pouvez adapter 300 demi-lunes, ce qui prend beaucoup de temps à la main. Mais avec la machine, vous pouvez labourer 10 à 15 hectares par jour. Les machines creusent aussi plus profondément, donnant aux plantes une plus grande chance de survie. Aujourd'hui, à Niamey, on a presque 10 tonnes de semences d'herbacées déjà prêtes en fait pour les plantations ou pour les semis, les ensemencements en fait dans les sites qu'on est en train de restaurer. Nous plantons différentes espèces sur les demi-lunes. Nous mettons les herbacées parce que ce sont des herbacées fourragères. Et ça, c'est un produit. En une année, en fait, les producteurs peuvent déjà récolter ça pour les animaux.
Action contre la désertification est un grand projet qui a fait un travail remarquable.
Si tout le monde travaille ensemble, on pourra transformer le terroir du Sahel, on pourra transformer la vie des gens et on pourra avoir en fait un meilleur futur pour tout le monde dans le Sahel.
This is an amazing initiative. This is what we call large-scale nature-based solution, large-scale land restoration. And it really it's already changing the life of many million people. It has got the potential to do much more, to really allow for sustaining livelihoods, recovering pasture, recovering trees, recovering soil and water resources in a very, very essential way. It's very important because the population growth in the Sahel area has been so dramatic that this is really a life support system. So it's more than just nature-based solution. It's a life solution, really. I would like to take you to another area from a regional perspective of the Green Wall Initiative to another food crisis area, a local area, which is very illustrative of the extreme that people can go on from a conflict, a climate hotspot area in prone to monsoon and landslide and very sensitive to climate and biodiversity degradation. And this is taking you to food crisis area is the Rohingya refugee camp in Bangladesh, where FAO and its partners have been implementing some nature work, which is among sort of nature-based solution for extremely affected and vulnerable people who have been displaced, forcibly displaced from the conflict and being hosted in the border in Bangladesh, in that area. And it's the largest worldwide refugee camp with more than 1 million people. And the work has been done to really regreen the area that was badly deforested by the people arriving there and who could survive thanks to the abundance of nature. Let's watch this video in the Rohingya camp and the work that FAO and its partners is doing, and it's really self-explanatory on the role of forests, the role of trees, the role of nature for lives and for livelihoods. Let's watch this.
গাছ গোছালা নোয়াছিল হদিন গুইটাইটা আসিল গুইটাইটা ইন কুড়ি হারিয়ারে বাত্তার আইন্দি আর তিয়া গরম বেশি লাইতো বইয়ার বাতাই না পাইতাম
You see the area is right now green, but when we came here in 2018, it was totally barren. Only the brown soil was visible at this area.
বাগানের মাঝে হাজ গজিলাম দিয়ে আর কিছু আসিল হদিন দলা হদিন হরলি আসিল দলা হদিন মেডি আসিল তারা বাগানের মাঝে আর সুন্দর করে আর বাগান লাগাই বিনার টাইম আজিনার টাইম পানি দিতাম
So we're jointly working with the forest department. We try to develop a technical specification to restore this kind of degraded area. We used a biological land stabilization method, and jointly with working with the Energy and Technical Working Group, we have achieved around 350 hectares of land. FAO restored around 258 hectares.
ফারো নবাঙি ফারো দরইয়ে সাবা মাঝে বই ফারি যারা শান্তি পায় অন্য অন্য বিভিন্ন জনের ক্যাম্পের মাঝে গাছ গোছালা নাই এর যদি গাছ গোছালা নাই দিছিল তোর মাঝে যদি এর যদি গাছ গোছালা লাগাইলে আর তুই সুন্দর লাগব বালা লাগব খেলা মানুষের ছায়ার তলে বই ফারিব
We are planning to expand our areas outside the camp as well because we want to restore the degraded forest land, we want to restore the ecosystem, and we want to bring back the lost greenery in this region.
Impressive, just absolutely impressive. Now we have seen the example of the work of forest and nature-based solution in the Sahel region, the Great Green Wall Initiative. We have seen this example of the Rohingya refugee camp. And from the regional and national local examples of the work being done by FAO and its partners, multiple partners that I have to thank here, we cannot do this alone. I would like to take you to another type of approach, another type of work at a global work, a global mechanism, which is called the Forest and Farm Facility. This is important and because we need to think about the complementaries of action wherever one is for this, whatever it's local or global level, and this what I sort of call sandwich approach. So the global level and what we also do at FAO is leading on this, and would like to listen to Sophie Graul, who's the forestry officer at the forestry division in FAO headquarters in Rome. And she's a country coach for the Forest and Farm Facility, and she has extensive experience in community-based enterprise development. She will talk and explain a little bit about this Forest and Farm Facility, and then she will introduce us to one example of the work that is taking place in Ecuador that illustrates the improvement of local food system that is using knowledge and agroforestry. Let's listen to Sophie Graul. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sophie Grauwels and I'm from the Forest and Farm Facility. The Forest and Farm Facility is a partnership which was created in 2012 between FAO, IIED, IUCN and Agricort. I'm going to talk today about the potential of forest and farm producer organizations as agents of resilience and nature-based solutions providers. An estimated 1.5 billion forest and farm producers make up 90% of the world's farmers. These producers supply around 80% of food in Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. They manage approximately 30% of forest lands in the global south and 500 million family farms. They are confronted increasingly with difficult climate conditions, including extremes of temperature, variable rainfall, droughts, storms, and flooding. But when they come together to work collectively, small farmers, family farmers, women, and indigenous groups are powerful agents of change and resilience. These are the people we can count on to produce food, restore landscapes, manage forests sustainably, and ensure food security, even when there are pandemics and other crises. They do provide us with many public goods. Grassroots organizations are able to sustainably manage nature at scale to respond to climate change challenges by helping their millions of members to address the food crisis with agroforestry and diversification approaches. Through the diversification of seeds, value chains of farm and forest products, forest and farm producers improve their livelihoods and the landscape resilience. Well-functional cooperatives have proved that in this way, smallholder farmers can rapidly develop climate-resilient businesses coping effectively with climate change. Using compost and biofertilizer techniques, they can also improve soil quality and at the same time foster better nutrition. The Forest and Farm Facility supports smallholder farmers through their organizations to improve their technical knowledge and business skills. By coming together and forming cooperatives, smallholder farmers could more easily earn organic certifications, invest in new production techniques, and sign contracts with companies and traders. Working together also enables farmers to increase the value of their goods they are producing and gain a much stronger voice with the local authorities. The Forest and Farm Facility operates across the global south, Africa, Latin America, and Asia in 10 partner countries. In the video we are now showing of one of our partner countries, you will see some of the great examples of solutions and innovations that were developed by forest and farm producer organizations, which can be a model of inspiration for all of us.
Let's watch the example from Ecuador.
El trabajo asociativo en sí para nosotros como asociación es de estar todos unidos para así poder nosotros conseguir mercados y nuestro producto llegue al consumidor. Se está también ya vinculando a la mujer. Ahorita ya contamos con 2 dirigentes mujeres dentro de la toma de decisiones. Entonces, con esto podemos visibilizar que hemos estado ya teniendo apertura, hemos estado ya logrando nosotros como mujeres estar en puntos estratégicos.
Sello Chagra para nosotros representa la cosmovisión nuestra, ¿no? de ser quichuas, la forma de producir.
La certificación orgánica ayuda a los productores y a la asociación dar un valor agregado al producto de los agricultores. El producto orgánico como la guayusa, el cacao, el plátano que estamos exportando va directamente a países grandes y eso a los productores le pagamos con un mejor precio.
Más fácil de esta forma.
Además de esto, Wiñas lo que les ofrece a ellos es tener un progreso en su calidad de vida, ir mejorando de a poco. ¿Cómo lo vamos haciendo? Lo vamos haciendo con apoyo técnico, con capacitaciones, con asistencia.
Lo que pido a los jóvenes, no más que todo, se confíen en la agricultura, porque la agricultura es una fuente de riqueza que no está explotada en su totalidad.
Now we've seen the last video. This is coming to the concluding and the closing of this event. And I would just like to remind you that this example from Ecuador, or the Quechua Winak Producer Organization, it illustrates the crucial role that indigenous people play. They are the custodian of about 80% of the world remaining biodiversity. I repeat, 80% of the world remaining biodiversity. This is just incredible. To end this session, I would just like for you to take away two main elements, two main messages, because this has been very rich in terms of video and messages and situation from Sahel, Ecuador to Bangladesh, right? So the first message is how important it is that nature-based food and agriculture solution, and more specifically forest-based solution, or how important these are for disaster, climate, and crisis risk and impact management. This is quite a lot. Risk, impact, and crisis management. This is fundamental. And this is very important, especially in food crisis situation, in which are countries affected by conflict, disaster, climate change, socioeconomic shocks, and the whole suite of events that we have seen. But it's also valid across the world for making sure we're building more resilient society. The second takeaway key message is that climate friendly or nature positive or deforestation free or regenerative, whatever you call it, agri-food system, they are at the center of the solution to the global climate, biodiversity, pollution, and health crisis that we face today. And this is essential not only for now, we are in these big crises now, but it's also for the future of our young children and the future generation. Thank you for being with us and looking forward to meet you soon.
Welcome to our Fireside Nature for Life Hub chat on investment, innovation, and inclusion to unleash the transformative power of community forestry. I believe we have a very timely topic today. My name is Nipuna. I'm your moderator on behalf of Recoft, And joining me today is a very diverse, passionate, and a knowledgeable panel. They are truly diverse and are coming from multiple sectors and different parts of the world. And like you, being from all around the world, we are connecting virtually. Our panel includes members from the civil society, youth organizations, the private sector, international and regional institutions, and government. Let me first briefly introduce you to the panelists. We have Apsana Kafle, a young forestry professional and an advocate. Though young, she's explored environmental and climate issues and worked with communities in Nepal, Ethiopia, and Canada. She's a graduate researcher and the International Forestry Students Association's North American representative. Joining us from Indonesia is Dr. Bambang Supriyanto. He's the Director General of Social Forestry and Environmental Partnership of the Government of Indonesia. He now plays a leadership role in the ASEAN Working Group on Promoting Social Forestry. He's collaborated closely with international and national conservation organizations. Our private sector representative is Dr. David Brand. He found New Forests in 2005, is a member of its board of directors, and the chair of companies' investment committees. David has over 40 years of experience in forestry investment, management, science, and policy. With the Tenure Facility, we have its executive director, Nonette Royo. She is a lawyer and a specialist in indigenous peoples, land rights, environment, and natural resources management. Most of her work has been in Southeast Asia and the Pacific, especially in Indonesia, Philippines, the Mekong, and Melanesia. Last but not least, from our home base in Thailand, Recoft, we have our executive director, Dr. David Gans. He has over 30 years of experience on forestry and climate change, working for the likes of the Nature Conservancy, USAID, ADPC, and others. With that introduction, let's delve into our discussion on the context, outlook, and what success would look like for community and social forestry. And as we discuss here, we invite you to join us virtually to engage via the chat. Now, kicking off the discussion at the home base, David, let me start with you. In today's context, with the climate crisis, economic struggles in many nations, and the pandemic still lingering on, why is community forestry important for all of us?
First, let's talk about the crisis of climate change, but also the post-pandemic recovery, as many nations are now looking towards the green economy to help them rebuild. I'd like to talk about community forestry as a proven nature-based solution, but also as a proven mechanism to help with this green recovery. We've found that communities, in particular, using community forestry enhances people's capacity, livelihood assets, resilience, and adaptive capacities. We did some research in all 7 countries where we have offices, looking at how communities have adjusted their livelihoods and ultimately how they have recovered both during the pandemic and now post-pandemic. The economic recovery that we've seen has come from investing in local institutions and community forestry as a means to really obtain goods and services from the larger landscape. We also found that community forestry nurtured local leadership, knowledge, and social cohesion for those communities. This means that they ultimately came together in ways that we have never seen before. They were able to absorb returning migrants that mostly came from urban locations and went back home because of the lockdowns or because ultimately the jobs disappeared. It's very important to understand that these community forests are not just able to absorb these migrants, but also economic shocks as people are dealing with inflation and other economic trends. We found that during the pandemic, about 3/4 of the communities relied on agricultural products, both from within the forest or from adjacent landscapes. We also found that 2/3 of those interviewed talked about community forestry as really helping them absorb the impacts of the pandemic and the economic shocks that came from after the pandemic. This is very important for us to understand because we're expecting with climate change equally similar shocks to these community institutions. We know that the social cohesion will be extremely important as these communities grow, but also the interface between agricultural systems, agroforestry, and community forestry will become even more important in the years to come.
Thank you, David. Apsana, I'm coming to you next. As a young person and the only other person with curly hair on this panel, why is community forestry a priority for you?
So as we all know, we are still living in pandemic. There's an ongoing war, economic crisis, climate disasters, and a lot of things that is happening. But as a young person and as a researcher, one thing that I really learned from everything that is going on today is the value of localization, the value that independence and being self-reliant teaches us to thrive in these crises. The way we are living our lives today, I think I wouldn't be wrong to say that we will not face anything as such in the future, because I think we will. So the best way we can come across and outside of it is to learn to live with it through localization and promoting our local resources. As we all know, community forestry are so important. They are a part of life. They are the resources from which we get our local food. They support our local ecosystem, our livelihood, and also provide other tangible benefits such as timber, medicinal plants, non-timber forest products, etc. But the other thing that is the beauty about community forestry is the indigenous and local people that live around it. The local culture, the traditional knowledge, the different resources and values that community forestry provide have helped us thrive through such pandemics, through such crises, through such uncertainties in the past. So I think using this library of knowledge of community forestry for our daily subsistence, for our local tangible resources, as well as learning from history about how these communities have thrived is the best way we can live in this time of uncertainty. Therefore, I think that community forestry is absolutely, absolutely crucial.
Thank you, Apsana. Dr. Bambang, you prefer to use the term social forestry in Indonesia, and the country has made big commitments and strides. Why is it a priority for you and the Indonesian government?
Thank you, Nipuna, for the question. First, I would like to explain about the engine of the social forestry. The engine of the social forestry is what we call as institutional community that consists of the farmer group, which enable to apply sustainable forest management to gain their welfare. There are two kinds of the right. The one is about the community right, and the second is individual right. The communal right in the farmer group, that is very important to protect the high conservation value forests from the threat of the illegal logging, illegal mining, forest fire, and also to solve the tenure conflict among the farmer member. Meanwhile, the individual right is for the agroforestry with a selected cluster for the community to fulfill the skill of the economy of the market. Secondly, I would like to explain about the Indonesia voluntary has committed to reducing carbon emission up to 29%, with 70.2% is from the management of the land use change, and forestry. Based on Katadata.com survey in 2020, 104 out of 9,915 social forestry business group said that after 5 years, of the social program implementation, the farmer group livelihood is improving more than double before the social forestry program. Meanwhile, 89.3% of are farmer-free from the illegal logging, and 94% are free from the forest fire, and 85.4% are free from the tenure conflict. And the third, this is very important, social forestry with activities that I said before, with the total area of 5.1 million hectares, will contribute about 5.4% out of 17.2 of the LULUCF. This target is stated in the Indonesia Volume Matching 2030. While the social forestry contribution, the Indonesia 2023 national budget is about 8.25 zillion rupiah, and for the 2024 is predicted will be around 9.75 zillion rupiah. So the social forestry contribution to the forest product of gross domestic bruto is almost 1%.
Thank you, Dr. Bamba. Dr. Brand. Let me call you Dr. Brand to tackle the challenge of having two Davids in the house. From the private sector's perspective, what does community forestry mean for you?
I guess, to kick off, I would say that there is substantial research and evidence now that communities provide the best steward for natural resources and forests, and that's both indigenous and other rural communities. The way I kind of look at the world is we have this continuously growing economy. We've got an ever larger population. And if we're going to have successful stewardship of natural resources, it really needs to be the people who are engaged and living in these rural economies that can do that job. And, to be successful, we really want to support local communities, empower them, ensure they have clear land use rights so that they can think for the long term, they can enter into appropriate economic partnerships and ensure that the forests are balancing both conservation and production outcomes.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. Now, over to you, Nonit. I know you work very closely with local communities at the front lines amidst the climate crisis.
Thank you, Nipuna. On this question of why community forestry is important for all of us, the keywords I choose here are community and forestry, especially in a climate crisis. First pictures that come to mind in a climate crisis is this intense drought, forest fires, blistering heat waves, or typhoons, floods, mass migration, conflict. Now that feeling that comes from that picture is a feeling of vulnerability, fear. Now, for indigenous peoples and local communities who live in forests, their picture had always been, and continue to be, where will they be? Where will they be when nature is at its most unpredictable? And that is why, for them and their practices, community forestry connects them to their environment, their soil, their trees, their plants, their herbs, their animals, their water, and nature. Now, caring for these trees is like caring for their own. Together, that is, as a community, caring for a place is caring for their survival. So this has been embedded in their psyche and their DNA, in their lives as a people together, and has been there for a millennia. Basic instinct of human nature is to depend on nature, to nurture and depend on nature for their own survival. Community forestry for us at these very modern times continue to remind us of the community continuing belief of being together, nurturing forests as key to our human survival.
So you say nurturing communities and forests are key to our survival. Nanit, let me ask you, what is the outlook for indigenous peoples and local communities nurturing our forests?
I choose the positive outlook that counters vulnerability. For forest communities, especially indigenous peoples, that form the bigger community of forest dwellers and forest-dependent peoples occupying 2/3 of the world's land area. The current global awareness of the importance of nature-based solutions by even all member states signatory to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, for example, is an indication of this positive outlook. These national commitments of states, translated to their NDCs or nationally determined contributions, is to reduce deforestation, to work with their local people, their indigenous people, their forest guardians, and to lower these emissions together to target the 1.5 degrees centigrade Paris Agreement, and to reward the indigenous peoples and local communities who are doing this with them by supporting their tenure. That was in COP26, the pledge, that for forest guardians to have secure rights to continue to do their work on nature-based solutions. So this is how we actually have positioned the outlook for indigenous peoples and local communities. And in the UN General Assembly Climate Week last week in New York City, for example, forest loss in 2021 was reported to have been reduced by 6.3%, where most of tropical Asia is on track for forest loss reduction per 2030 target. And some of the examples cited included Indonesia, where there is a huge reduction of commodity-driven deforestation due to its own people protecting their forests and pushing for policies for this, especially indigenous peoples and local communities. In Gabon, there was also this improved forest governance to combat illegal logging and the protection of national parks. And the DRC is the same, where the government is meeting its target of 3 million community forest tenure rights and aiming for additional 5 million to help the government protect their forests.
Glad to hear you mention the progress in Asia, Nanit. You echoed what Dr. Bambang mentioned about the progress and commitment of Indonesia. Now, David, I know you're cautiously optimistic about the outlook, and you want to talk about tackling potential challenges to unleashing indigenous and local people's true potential.
The outlook for forest communities and indigenous peoples and local communities actually is very aspirational. And I think ultimately we need to understand that indigenous peoples and local communities are already self-identifying as part of the solution, but they're also self-identifying as part of the challenge. We understand that ultimately we have expectations on climate change, on biodiversity conservation, and now on ecosystem resiliency. And these local communities and indigenous peoples need our support in more ways than one. This is more than just about climate finance or conservation finance, being able to get down to these local institutions, but it's also about understanding the social cohesion that I just mentioned in my previous answer to the last question. These local institutions need to have strong leadership, and they need to have good social cohesion to be able to address any of these development challenges. Climate finance and conservation finance is just part of their challenge. Ultimately, they will need our support in other ways to be able to monitor outcomes, report on those outcomes, and ultimately address their immediate livelihood needs. If we don't address those immediate livelihood needs, then any of these alternative solutions are going to fail, and IPLCs, indigenous peoples and local communities, will be then a part of the problem. We know that ultimately they are part of the solution, and we need to give them the right tools and capacities to address all of these expectations that are coming to them globally.
Thank you, David. Dr. Brand, From your perspective, are there any concerns about community forestry programs? And what are the positive trends?
Thanks, Napuna. I guess I would say that it's been mixed, really, in terms of the success of community forestry programs and community forestry management systems. But I do think that we're moving in the right direction. When I look at some of the places like Canada, there's a real move towards empowering First Nations to take back control of natural resources. I see in the US, there's certainly a lot of Native American communities that are taking back control of natural resources. Maori in New Zealand, many of the countries where we work in Southeast Asia, there's certainly an acknowledgement that re-empowering communities to take control of natural resources is where we should be heading. So, I think hopefully the trend is in the right direction. We just need to keep moving that way.
Thank you, Dr. Brandt. Apsana, how would you echo the youth perspectives on community forestry?
Working in the international forestry sector with other youth advocates, I really value the importance of young people, especially those local and traditional communities across the world, who are such an valuable resource for managing our forest and for taking care of us in the time of crises. But through RECOFT and my position as researcher, when I go and listen to their stories, I think there is a paradox. I really can hear them that they are not quite fulfilled with or satisfied with the roles in the community forestry. This is because the world is changing and we want our community forests to be conventional and traditional the way they are. This is not, fulfilling the young people in terms of the opportunity costs that they are getting, or maybe our forestry system is not as attractive as the other sectors like IT or economy, etc. On one hand, when we are demanding them to really continue what they are doing, we should also be listening to them. Both the youth on the other end are demanding for one common thing. And to echo their voice today, I think young people are really saying that it's not enough the way that we are using our forest or the way we are managing our forest. We really need to change the approach that we are working on in our forestry. And this is the outlook that I have from my multiple roles in the forestry sector.
Thank you. Now let's move on to talking tangible solutions. Nanit, let me come to you first. What does successful innovation, investment, and investment look like?
For me, successful innovations are holistic. All the world know now that planting trees alone, it's not enough. If there is no community to nurture the forest, to nurture them back for the long term and for generations. So these community members do not have the land tenure to protect the trees as they grow, to defend the perimeters of the land where the forest groves are from incursion, conversion, and devastation, and to ensure that they can generate their own livelihoods and continue their traditional practices and governance of these territories. Within that context, there is no successful innovation. So just as examples, we are supporting community forests of indigenous peoples in Indonesia and Afro-descendants in Colombia and the Batu and local communities in the DRC, who all have the basic component of governance over mapped territories and forest landscapes of mixed agroforests and natural forests. And they're working together to protect this area against encroachers using the law that recognizes their tenure over their territories. So these forest areas they protect form part of what's currently being processed for tenure for up to 14 million hectares of tropical rainforests within the reach, at least just within the reach of the tenure facility partnerships.
It's great to hear how the tenure facility partnerships are mobilizing. David, I know RECOFT is committed to innovation too. What would you like to highlight?
So one of the successful innovations that I'd like to brief you on is an attempt in Cambodia to work with credit schemes. I say an attempt because we just started piloting this in the last year or two. And ultimately, we're trying to undermine the black market of debt, of a vicious cycle of debt that many farmers and local communities get into. This microcredit scheme is a revolving fund. It helps with village development issues, but also provides the critical financing for community forestry to succeed. We started with this in the Prey Long landscape in Cambodia with support from the Swedes and the Swiss, and ultimately with government support as well. We're really looking to this to help scale up sustainable financing options in ways that we've never seen before. This kind of microcredit scheme, I think, will be ultimately critical for climate finance or conservation finance to seed or to incubate these village development funds in ways that are more sustainable than traditional ODA financing.
Thank you, David. Both you and Dr. Bambang wanted to talk about digital innovation for access and bridging market and stakeholder divides. But we have limited time, and I'm keen to hear about how Indonesia used COVID-19 as a window to promote digital solutions. Dr. Bambang, over to you.
Regarding innovation and investment in social forestry, Indonesia has some innovation that has brought a blessing from the COVID-19 pandemic to the work of the social forestry. Namely, first, this is about innovation in digital technology, facilitating access for social forestry approval through online application. Capacity development for social forestry facilitator through e-learning. Optimizing market access using digital marketing platform. And the second, this is the innovation is still being developed to increase productivity, scale up economic, and added value for the regional development. The government of Indonesia also has been developing a strategy to accelerate the social forestry program called Integrated Area Development. The EAD aims to connect the social forestry program with the regional government economic program, which will replicate it and expand the success of one of the social forestry group to other social forestry group through the engagement and collaboration of the multiple stakeholders such as the national government, regional government, and private sector. What I'm looking for after the cluster community is to connect the product to the market through off-taker to make sure the sustainability between the product and the market, which will be benefit to the farmer. And the second is I'm also targeting the development of the community-based industry for the added value of the product and creating more jobs in the village.
Some great work there, Dr. Bambang. Apsana, what does inclusion and innovation look like for youth?
As I mentioned about, the importance and value of localization, and also the paradox about young people wanting to conserve forests but not wanting to stick in the industry. So I think in this context, the best innovation that we need is a big transformation in the way we are operating our community forestry. At least from my experience in Nepal, Southeast Asia, Africa, and reading context about Latin America, what I really see is that our forestry and our community forestry management agendas and approaches need to be more innovative and come out of the conservative way, the way we are managing it. I know that there is a value in managing them in a conservative and pattern, but the transformation and innovation can be through private sector integration and commercializing these sector. For instance, now I'm working as a forester researcher in Canada, where forestry is such a dominant sector. Because of forestry, several other industries have been thriving. But in our countries where traditional and participatory forest management exists, they seem to be less attractive to young people moving forward. So if we had to include young people like me or any other young person with different skill set, I think we need to bring private sector and all the multi-sector integrate in our forest management approaches. Organizations like RECOFT can be a very valuable asset in helping and supporting the government in making the enabling environment through policy integration. So I think if this innovation is brought into the community forestry, it provides tremendous opportunities for people with different skill sets to come and act. And I think that is a great way we can move forward.
Thank you, Apsana. Dr. Brand, she mentioned the private sector as a potential motivator for youth. And I want to hear from you, what are the key ingredients for success as an investor?
Well, I guess we've had a number of investments that have relied on community partnerships, and I would say that there are a couple of key ingredients of success. The first is, you really need communities to have clear land use rights, and that empowers people to think for the long term. And I guess from our perspective, it also empowers us as investors to feel that we have the confidence to invest because we have a long-term partner that we can work with. The second thing, I guess, is that when you work with community forest owners as an outside investor, you want to make sure that we've got good alignment in terms of the benefit sharing. I mean, we can bring capital, we can bring technology and expertise, know-how, but ultimately we're working with the long-term stewards of the land and the forests, and we need to ensure that there's an appropriate benefit sharing, risk sharing that aligns us with the local community, so we both get a win-win outcome from the investment program. And I think it's also increasingly important that when we engage with the communities, we engage with the whole of the community, and that means thinking about gender, thinking about how decision making can be distributed so that we have real confidence that we have a durable agreement with the whole community. We've done a number of projects. We've got a program in Tasmania and Australia called Active Acre, where we work with farmers. We look at their farms and identify areas maybe that aren't making a lot of money. We then offer to lease those areas and reforest them so that there's a diversification of farm income and an increase in the total farm income. We've worked with the Maori iwi in New Zealand, where, for example, we helped buy back an area of traditional land, and then we took a forestry cutting right on the timber plantations on that land for one cycle. In the US, we've worked with a number of Native American tribes to develop forest carbon offset projects, and then we have a revenue share on the back end. So we bring the expertise, but the natural resources are driving most of the return, and the bulk of that return goes to the Native American communities. In Laos, we have a forestry investment where we have an outgrower program with hundreds of rural farmers. We provide them the seedlings, they plant the trees on their land, and when they become mature, then we can harvest those trees and they can get the same funding as we get. So, there's a lot of, I think, opportunities that community forestry, working with investors like ourselves, can really generate great outcomes.
Thank you, David. And David, Dr. Brand, Nonit, Dr. Bambang, Apsana, and everyone who joined us online. I think we had a great discussion, and our time's up for now. We talked about holistic solutions, establishing clear rights, bridging gaps using innovation, equitable and inclusive sharing of benefits, and cross-sector collaboration, and many more. I hope this discussion inspired you. I want to leave you with this thought from Nonit, which I loved. For millennia, for humans, caring for a place was caring for our own survival. It's a basic instinct of human nature to nurture and depend on nature for our survival. That's a true tongue twister, but it's brilliant. It's a basic instinct of human nature to nurture and depend on nature for our survival. Let's keep that in mind now as we say goodbye. Thank you, everyone.
That's it for today's theme on creating a planetary safety net. And that's also a wrap on this year's Nature for Life Hub. We encourage you to explore the Nature for Life Hub throughout the coming months. All of the content will be available for you to watch, download, and share with others. We also encourage you to visit the Action Center where you can make your voice heard on all of the themes we've covered this year. Thanks again for joining this year's Nature for Life Hub, and we hope to see you again soon.